are live. Wonderful. All right.
Is
gentlemen, ladies, everybody listening.
And Keller.
And Keller. Welcome to CornStars episode E=MC². We are super excited for this episode. We have a very special guest, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit here in a minute. We're going to do a couple of quick updates. And, of course, we're going to say thank you to our sponsors. Tonight's sponsors are BlackBox cages, excuse me. We found at blackboxcages.com. They make a exceptional rack system. They make exceptional viewable cages. They make exceptional rack systems for Venomous. I have an XR16 on the way that I'm excited to add to my XR20, so I can have a nice big stack of V35S, V15, and V18. It's a very nice combo. I got it with the dual temperature zone, so up high I can do my 84, 86 degrees for some of my hotter temp species, and down below I can hit my 78, 80 for some of those cooler Mexicana kings and some of the Pituophis, the Depii, and the Depii and the Depii jani that are going to be going there. Check them out at blackboxcages.com. They make an exceptional product. Again, as an engineer, I'm always impressed every time I touch that product, how nice their racks are. There's a code THN25. You can use that at checkout for a little bit of a discount. CornStars is also brought to you tonight by Silent Hill Reptiles. We had JT on the show last
week before last,
2 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah.
He was going over some of his breeding plans. I think a lot of us were excited to see some of the stuff that he's going to be pairing up. You're going to be able to check him out on Morph Market. He also has his own site that he runs. I don't remember exactly how many clutches he said he had planned, but goodness, some of them were wonderful. I think everybody in here, maybe not Craig, has snakes from JT, and we're excited to see what he's going to do this year. And the final sponsor for the show.
I am one of those.
Yeah, he is also a host. Is Justin here with Fulvius Apparel, making some of the coolest reptile-related swag you can have. I think
South Carolina corn shirt on here.
South Carolina corn snake shirt that is going to be going live if it's not live already.
It is. It's just not on this district. This is like the Cadillac of
it's
a tri blend.
I love these.
This
shirts.
is a tri blend. It's even nicer than the ones you get.
I'm gonna have to
usually we can't print on them because they're a blend, but I'm experimenting to see how this holds up in a couple washes. So
okay. Cool.
Yeah, they'll be more expensive, but if I offer them, they're worth the money.
Absolutely.
They're incredible.
Well, this is actually a Fulvius Apparel shirt, but it has my logo on it, and I have the old flippin' tin hat that was done, and Joe's got a Fulvius hat here.
Hat.
All your don't be a hemipene. All of your reptile related clothing, and also he still does coffee mugs. Check them out. That's fulviusapparel.com, and you're going to use code THN at checkout for 10% off, 15% off. 15% off, ladies and gentlemen, in this economy. Get it where you can get it. Awesome. Well, we're going to do a couple of real quick updates for just our own personal collections, and then we're going to be talking with our guests. We're extremely excited tonight. We have the Craig Trumbower. He's going to be talking with us a little bit about his history and his involvement in corn snakes, and hopefully a few maybe a story or two about where he falls into this hobby and stuff that he might have worked with.
That probably won't happen.
Yeah.
Craig, are you aware that we refer to you, Howie Sherman, and Tony D as the Holy Trinity?
Well, that's pretty flattering. I have in my old age, I'm having a lot of adjectives and descriptors thrown at me, which is very nice. I'm not sure how true those things are, but
told Tony and he laughed.
Glad to be in the Holy Grail, as long as if it's the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, I certainly hope I'm the Father. So, so especially knowing Howie for my whole life. So
Howie's got to be the Holy Ghost.
Howie's a wreck. Howie's a wreck. Smart man, but he's a wreck.
Tony will be the son because he's the youngest, right?
Yeah, Tony's a good friend. Tony just actually drove down here to do an edit on the Pituophis book I just finished and did a remarkable job. Yeah, he really did.
Craig, I mean, this show could be in about 2 minutes, could be the Pituophis podcast, and we could just talk about Pituophis the whole time.
No. I've had enough Pituophis. 3 years of it. Listen.
Has it been 3 years that you've been?
I'm not. Well, I had some health problems in between, but look, I was asked to do it. I said I'm not the guy, and finally, after doing a lot of research and stuff, realized why nobody wanted to do it. There's so many taxonomic,
It's a mess.
taxonomic issues.
Yeah.
And with phylogenetics and everything today, and you guys are aware of all of that. It impacts every species, subspecies. We all have our opinions, and I'm pretty vocal about how I feel. I'm maybe stuck in the mud and old school, but I have some pretty hefty guys on my side, Harry Green and Hillis and other people, and so we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. We're going to do a little talk on the book a little later. So
yeah,
Pituophis are my favorite genus. So
yeah, well, it's good to hear. It's certainly one of mine, and I hope this book gives something to everybody. It's kind of written like that, and we'll see. It's out of my hands. It's in Bob's hands, my publisher, and
awesome.
Gordy Schuett, since I've known since he was a kid, is doing the scientific edit on it. So with his yellow and red pen, he sent me a picture grinning, which means he's going to chop the shit out of this thing. So, but I was given last say, so we'll see. I hope it's worthy of the effort. I hope it contributes to herpetoculture and herpetology in some small way.
It undoubtedly will. Yeah.
Yeah. And then real quick, I mean, what was the deciding factor where that made you say, okay, I'll do it? Like, what was the motivation there?
I've known Bob for a long time. Yeah, Bob and Tel Hicks and those guys, and Bob's kind of like a pseudo son in some ways. I have great respect for him. His story is actually, he's somebody you really should have on. His story of, I don't know if you know Bob's story. Bob Ashley, Eco Publishing,
yeah.
and Bob's got his figures and everything, and does some really terrific shows and stuff too. But we won't get into his story. I'll leave that for him. But he asked me to do it, and I turned it down several times. I decided, I've got 7 years of school and everything, but I'm not an academic. I don't consider myself that. But I finally gave in because nobody else wanted to do it, and there's reasons why. The taxonomy is just insane, and when academics can't agree, you can kind of open the door and step in and say, okay, well, I'll do it, and I did it. It's in two parts. The first part is I really wrote it in the format of Write and Write. If you guys understand or know the old handbooks, Write and Write's handbooks, two of the greatest books I think ever written, and written in the 50s, and it's kind of in that style. I love that style. And then the second part is herpetoculture, and I take a little bit more of a less serious view, and do a little bit of scolding on how people take care of snakes and too many snakes and how we should do it and that sort of thing. But I hope there's something there for the novice all the way to Harry Green, just somebody who can grab that book and get something out of it. The mapping was done by Jordan Parrott, and he's done an excellent job on it.
Jordan's a good guy too.
I've known Jordan a long time. George's a wonderful man. Great father, great guy. Just got back from his second trip from Australia with some remarkable stories. But so I decided to do it, and I don't know if I'm the guy, but I'll tell you, after 3 years of reading so many papers, I probably was the guy for a few months because I saw it every day, to the point where, and I said, I don't know, back to corn snakes maybe. But no, it's I think it's a needed book, and I hope it contributes. So the cover is my is a really great cover. I may have sent that to you in those pictures. I don't know.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
It's my 7'8" Kentucky pine, a gift from Phil Peak, and one of the first breedings ever. I've had him for a while, and
it's a big boy.
And beautiful, just stunning animal. And I went to college in Kentucky for 4 years, and I spent 4 years looking for those guys up near Mammoth Cave in that area, studying all the pickles from University of Kentucky. And of course, I didn't have any luck. And so when I heard of Phil Peak, after 17 years, they've managed to come up with 3 and paired them up. It was big news to me. So my absolute favorite snake, and I believe the rarest snake, or at least locality in the United States. And there are other things, and that we can argue about that, but a very rare snake. And I've been lucky enough to get an unrelated. All the ones being produced now are related, and there's quite a bit of genetic flawing because of that.
Yes,
that founder stock, and most people will have a clutch of 7 or 8, and 3 will be deformed, some kind of deformities, a lot of tail deformities. And but I've got an unrelated female, and she produced 11 eggs, and they were all perfect last year. Awesome. So I'm really, really happy to have that. I've been shooting a few animals back to Phil Peak, who's trying to convince the Kentucky legislature to do something like Texas has with Louisiana pine snake, and maybe have an area where they can reestablish populations through breeding. So I'm shoveling some of those animals back to him.
That's awesome.
And I sell some. And by the way, I'm a conservationist, but I have snakes in a box. I don't have a problem with that. I take good care of them, and I sell snakes, and I don't have a problem with that either. So,
amen. Yeah.
I'm just saying, if you do it right, I think it's perfectly okay. So,
I have all the recognized pines, and I don't have any Kentuckys, and I kind of stayed away from them because that kind of fear of deleterious genetics from inbreeding.
It's a big problem, and we can get into that with corn snakes, certainly with corn snakes. Sure. Exophthalmus, which showed up in the palmetto corn snake. Exophthalmus is the bulging of eyes, and you certainly see that. It's really it's a chromatophore defect that is linked to leucism.
Yes, yeah.
So that's why you see a lot of leucistic snakes with these bulging eyes. It's not necessarily the thyroid thing that we see in humans, but it's the proper term. And my animals, I got my first animal, the first breeding that Don Soderberg did. Don's a good friend, and they were 2,000 a piece, and he did me the grace of selling me one for 1,000, and which, hey, no complaints. I was very happy to get that snake.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I went to South Carolina, and I captured, a couple of females, and outbred originally, just the very beginning. And I've kept that line going, and I have no exophthalmus in mine. It's one of the most wonderful morphs to come out of the wild I've ever seen. It's a really remarkable story with the pigeon farm, and you guys know that, and how Don got it, and it's a wonderful snake. But I would hope that people don't perpetuate breeding, genetic flaws, and we see some of that, in the industry. So we don't need that.
No, and it's kind of perpetuated by this pyramid scheme of sales, right? We so often in this hobby we have this. Well, if you buy these $2,000 snakes, you're going to breed them together, and you're going to make a bunch of $2,000 babies, and now you're going to be rich because you're going to sell 16 $2,000 snakes, and you'll maybe hold a couple back, and you keep that going for 5 years, and you pay your house off. It's like, well, there's also the that kind of damning thing about pyramid schemes where we realize that every generation they get a little cheaper.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
I bred the first albino Nelsoni. I went to South Carolina, got them from Doug Moody. And we got on a plane with cash. He wanted cash strapped to our legs, and they were expensive. And, it was like big drug dealers. And we bought the snakes and brought them home. And I bred them quickly, and they were $2,000. Next year, $1,000. I made a lot of money selling albino Nelsoni, and but within 4 years they were like $100 snakes, and nothing wrong, with $100 snakes. If you're going to, put dollar signs on snakes, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, you're right. My advice to people, I always said, look, don't quit your day job. Work hard at what you're doing, and if you it's really not about selling your snakes. It's about selling your passion.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk around shows today and you see so many people that they just look like they don't want to be there. They're sitting there with, with all these snakes, and they're sitting down. They don't stand up and talk to people. They don't give a kid a corn snake. They can't afford it. And it's different. I sell what I'm passionate about. And today I'm winding down. I'm 77 and I've gone full circle. I'm kind of back to corn snakes and things. I did mostly venomous for 50 years and pit vipers, mostly crotalids, and did boas and pythons with Dave and Tracy for a long time, and a colubrid guy. I like it all. And I feel very fortunate that I'm not the guy that says, it's just a ball python show or it's this or that. I just don't do that. I look at some ball pythons kind of like Vern Bechtel used to look at things, and I go, how in the hell do you get an orange snake?
Yeah.
Shark repellent orange. These colors, the chromatophores. How does this even happen? I don't know, but I find it fascinating, so I like it all, But it's really about selling your passion. It's if you're enthused about what you have and you want to talk to people and kids. I mean, I don't produce that much anymore. I don't have that many snakes. I think I've got 85 snakes or something, and it's enough. But I go to Daytona because I see friends. I've been to every one, and I don't ship anymore. I just take my stuff, and most of my stuff's pre-sold, and I just deliver it there, and spend time, talking to people. But those are customers that have come back for 20, 30 years. I've got some docs and lawyers that are a little stuffy. Hopefully they're not listening to me right now, but they don't want to go to a show and look at green hair and long white beards and all that kind of stuff. But they come back because they had a good experience, and, you educate them, and you're passionate about what you do, and you take that time and listen, that stuff works. It may sound a little corny, but it works. And if you take care of those people that buy from you, they come back.
Oh, absolutely.
We joke that your table's the first one we all make a beeline for when the doors open at Daytona. So,
yeah. Well, and that's great. It's great to hear. I'll tell you a real quick little story as an example of this. So it was about 3 years ago, and you may have heard the story in one of the other shows, but Linda and I were standing behind the table, and this guy walks in Daytona, and he kind of ducks under the door. And I went, golly, look at this guy. This guy's like 6'10", 6'11". And, when you see somebody that big, everybody looks, and, you're thinking basketball or whatever. I don't know. And he starts walking in, and he keeps walking, and he's coming closer and closer. And he walks right up to my table. And I said, God, we were just looking at you. And he goes, yeah, I know I'm tall. And he goes, you won't remember me, but he said, I was in Orlando, and I saw this was the weekend of the show, and I saw your name at the table. So I drove over here to tell you this. He said, I was here years ago with my mom, and she couldn't afford to buy me an Okatee corn snake that you produced. And you gave me a pair. And he said, that started my career. I just want to let you know, I just finished my PhD. I have a professorship now in herpetology, and you started that, and I just wanted to say thanks. And he turned around and walked out, and that's a true story.
That's awesome.
Love it.
Yeah, and it takes so little. If you take that time to educate, give a kid a snake. That kid will grow up and come back and remember you and buy stuff from you every year. And we need a little bit more of that. We need a little bit more human kindness in the industry, and
absolutely.
And I think we can do it. Most of you guys are really good about that. And I walk around the shows like a grumpy old man, and people I say, well, Bob or Bill or Ed, if you just stand up and smile and say something nice, give a snake away or something, and you might do a little better. So
I gave a young Joe Rosa a rhino rat snake.
Yes, you did. That thing is amazing.
Every year when I breed stuff, 80% of my stuff that I produce goes out to friends.
Yeah, I was going to say Chris
people.
ends up.
Well, yeah, the longer you do this, trust me.
Yeah.
And you know, it's 77 now. I mean, I've got people that come to my table and they got a pair of 2 cups and a pair of snakes, and I go, God, what do you have in there? And there's some spectacular pair of snakes, and they go, well, I want you to have these. And I'm thinking, you know, where the hell were you like 30 years ago? You know, I would have.
Yeah.
I would have bought these, you know. But you know, I'm winding down. I'm trying to keep numbers down, and but I'm still passionate, so that's really hard to do. I never go to a show and not come home with something because I still love it. You know?
It's too fun. Yeah, I've definitely realized. Usually, I'm the oldest one on this podcast, but you know, we're getting there. Joe, you're a year older than me, right?
I'm older than you.
Oh, you're a little younger. That's what it is. I'm the baby.
So how old are you guys?
I'm 42.
Okay.
I just celebrated my 40th birthday.
Okay.
I'm 34.
Just
my kids are all older than you by a decade, so I got kids. So
that's awesome. But no, I've definitely realized as I've gone on this adventure, and I've got, you know, I was a lizard breeder for 22 years. I still have gecko eggs in the incubator. I've got first time species for me this year in the incubator, and I love it still. But I got so enamored in colubrids about 18 years ago, but started breeding about 10 years ago, really heavily into it. I've really realized that the colubrid group, the persona of the colubrid group, is just the best because I usually don't have to buy snakes and I usually don't have to sell snakes. We just send each other boxes.
Well, that's kind of how it is.
Yeah.
You know, we're the common man. We're the colubrid people, although there are some pretty hefty colubrids. But I'm back to that, and I love that. I mean, I was part of having some only pairs in the world type snakes and things at times, and Bolins back in the time when nobody had them, and Ari hadn't even been out there yet, and had all those snakes, and I loved them. But I'll tell you right now, I mean, I can look in my cages, and I have mostly glass cages where I can view, and I can look at a simple corn snake and I can say, you know what, that's just a remarkable animal. And so my collection is really an eclectic mix of what I'm passionate about and what I love at this point in my life. And, you know, it's funny, I'll get some calls and people say, and I'm kind of private. I try, you know, if people make arrangements, they can come by. They say, well, we'd like to see your facility. And I have to kind of chuckle, you know. I mean, I had some big snake rooms and things, but you know, I've got a bedroom. It's pretty cool. I make my own cages and had them for a long time, and it looks good. And I've got an overflow into a walk-in closet, and I just have to chuckle. You know, the days of facilities and 10 miles of racks. I'm not that guy. And half the stuff people would look at me like, you know, well, where's the good stuff? And my response is, you're looking at it.
Yeah.
If you don't appreciate what you're looking at, I have a lot of bears, rat snakes, and you know, I've got quite a few corn snakes, and I've got some kings and some Mexicanans, and it's an eclectic mix, but things that I like, and that works for me. And I wish I could see more of that. You know. We're kind of into it, like what's hot and what's not. What's the next thing to? Yeah. It's driven by that dollar, and you know, I tell people, look, I know 6-7 people that have made millions, and they've worked hard, and they've developed industries, and you know, I didn't do that. I never had that intention to want to do that. I did help educate 4 kids with college educations with selling snakes, and I don't have a problem with that. As long as you do it right, you know, and I discussed some of that in the Pituophis book, you know, you know, as long as I feel good, I breed my own mice and rats, and I've been doing the same stuff for almost 60 years. I don't know how, I wouldn't know how to survive without it. And, you know, I'm lucky to have had a family and Linda, it's just part of our life, you know, and you guys know that, you understand that.
Absolutely.
It takes special relationships, you know, to listen, to put up with that. And,
It sure does.
well, I talk about that in the book too. I'm a real blabbermouth to people. I tell them, taking that family to the snake show for their vacation isn't really the vacation. You might want to hit Disney World first or something. And
There's the only reason I'm not going to Daytona this year. I've gone the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's a big trek for me. I'm on the other
Sure.
side of the world almost. Joe's twice as far as I am. But it's my daughter, my little 8-year-old girl, is so mad that I get to go to the big reptile show without her every year.
Yeah.
That she said, and mom said she can't go with me because mom don't want to go, and that's okay. She can't go till she's 10 years old. And so not this year, but the following year she'll be 10. So I told her I'm going to wait and I'm going to take you in 2026. So it's that's
well, good. If you include your family,
yeah.
it's a great time. I years ago I piled all 4 kids in a Isuzu Trooper, and we headed out to West Texas. And the kids would moan and say they want to go to Disney World, and they groan. And now they talk about the best times of their lives were out there in the middle of the desert at nighttime and all the stuff we saw. And if we can get kids to put the black box down for a few minutes and really get out there, and it doesn't have to be West Texas. Go to the end of the street and go into that empty lot and kick that board over, and you see a 6-line race runner or whatever. It's magic. You look at a kid's face, and they want to jump down. I found something, and it's that's how it all started for me, and probably for you guys too. Some simple little thing, and so I'm lucky to have had that. Golly, what a great life I've had. I mean, it hasn't always been easy, and I've worked really hard. I'm financially independent. I don't owe anything. I worked hard to do that. I don't consider myself, a rich man. I consider myself a lucky man because I've had this in my life. If it wasn't this, it would have been something else. I'm just that kind of person. There's so much in this world that I love that I wish I knew more about. And it's if you can turn a child on to something, it's just to see the magic. At the end of my Pituophis book, I've got a number of pages. All the contributors, I asked them to send a picture of their grandchild or their child with a snake, and hopefully a Pituophis. I got kind of a mix of stuff. And golly, looking at those pictures of those kids, and the delight in their eyes and the excitement. It's a great thing.
It is.
Actually,
Absolutely.
I have a question along those lines. Kind of revisiting your books recently, knowing we were going to have you on, and just what I remember about you and the interaction that we had, and knowing that I've based some of my personal philosophies around reptiles based on the way that you act and the way that people you have influenced have acted, these guys included. I'm looking at your history, and you had, obviously, there was a great tragedy at the beginning. And then from then on, it seems like you've had some of the most positive influences just in your life. And you're such a passionate person to begin with. If it hadn't been reptiles, do you think that passion would have carried into, whatever hobby you happen, whatever tickled you at that moment? Would you be, the Craig Trumbower of painting or something like that? If you had gone a different way, would it be the same passion?
Well, I'm a woodworker. I carve lepidus. I carve things. Terry Vanderven and I team up, and he, of course, makes some pretty cool knives, and I make knife boxes, and we do a lot of USARC stuff. I have a lot of interests that I'm really passionate about. But, to answer your question, I'm that kind of person. In my childhood, just briefly, my dad was one of the top P-51 pilots in World War II. He was one of the most decorated pilots, Distinguished Flying Cross twice, Air Medal 13 times, and flew with Chuck Yeager, was quite a man. And we had rented a boat, a cabin cruiser, and he fell off the front of the boat and the prop hit him. He was 37. I jumped off the back of the boat. And the last picture I have of my dad was him underwater reaching for my hand. And I didn't get it. And I was 10. And I lived with that guilt. And, there's no therapy back there in 59 or anything. Mm-hmm. Lived with a lot of things. I was an angry guy. As always getting in fights at schools. And real briefly, one day I was... we were on Air Force Base, and it was right before my dad was killed. And I was down the creek and had a BB gun, old Daisy BB gun, and shot a ribbon snake, and was bragging about it at school. And I had a 5th grade teacher who asked me, "So, well, why'd you kill it?" I said, "Well, it's a snake, So she had me do a book report on snakes, and that's what kind of launched things. And so I have Carl Schmitt's little blue book, and I buy all the copies from Mike Crick or anybody who sells them, and I give them to friends. It kind of launched my whole thing with snakes. And, it got me through a really tough time as a child. I really was into just the snake thing and everything else. And then it just kind of expanded and exploded. But I can't imagine living a life without being this passionate about something. And, I a lot of people my age that, they're bored. They say, gosh, I need a hobby. I need to do something. And I get up at 5:30 and I don't have enough time in my life to do all the things that I still want to do. And people that have that, I think, are very fortunate. And, look, if you're not passionate about snakes, we've seen so many people, they come and go. They're all in. They spend thousands of dollars on equipment, and then they're out. And it's the thing that's missing is that passion. And you guys, and you understand when you walk by and you look in that cage and you go, wow, man, this, how in the world can somebody put together scales and color in this manner, and it just blows you away. And so I've never lost that. And I think that's been a good thing in my life. So
absolutely.
Shane Lowe asked, did the aviation bug ever get into your system?
Say what now?
Did the aviation bug ever get into your system as far as interest?
Oh, well, my dad was such a celebrated pilot. And no, not really. I actually had an appointment because of my dad, the Air Force Academy. I didn't go. I went to another college. And, but no, it really never did. I did go up in a P-51 as a gift to me with the most celebrated living P-51 pilot. He's a big guy, and he's got his own P-51, and I let him read my dad's flight log, and he cried. He was on a runway at a show, and he said, "Well, this is free," and wow. Took me for a hell of an hour's ride in that P-51. So, which scared the shit out of me, by the way. I don't think I've always thought of myself as a tough guy, but I don't think I was as tough as my dad. And, I'm up there in that P-51. I'm going, golly, man, this thing is crazy, and for an old plane, 480 miles an hour. And it was the Cadillac of planes when it came along. So pretty cool.
Those moments of relation that we get to have with, whether it's our fathers or mentors, and it's divorced from their touch, right? Like it's something that you get to share that maybe they're not a part of, but still it really creates a special moment. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, the mentor thing is huge.
Yeah.
We've all had them, and we can all do that, and we can kind of light that spark. I mean, look, if your child, it has an iPhone, and he looks at an elephant and he sees that trunk and he thinks that's pretty cool. Well, that's cool. But if he goes to a zoo, and that's controversial, and I can talk at length about that. I'm an advocate of zoos done right.
Yeah.
Because they educate. And so, and you have an elephant toss his trunk over the fence and grab your peanut bag, and that little finger, the proboscis thing, grabs the kid's finger. He will never forget that. All of a sudden, he's a fan of an elephant, and that stays for life, man. You can't learn that through a screen.
Yeah.
And it's that visceral, that touch thing, that
sight, just being in the presence of it alone.
Well,
the bald eagles, you don't have appreciation to them until you see the sheer size of them, and you're like, oh my god, like it's real. It's a
the smell, the eyelashes, it's overwhelming. But you can reduce that to a snake. I mean, you guys, how many times have you guys flipped something over, been out and by yourself, and you wish you'd had your best friends with you because you found something really cool?
Yeah.
And you flip this over, and for me, mostly it was always a big eastern diamondback, just coiled, and found it. And I sit there and I just go, God, shit, this is just, there is nothing cooler than this thing right now. I wish I had 10 people with me. Yep. And you just sit there and, golly, how many people today get that? I mean, they get up, they go to work, they're good people, they go fishing, they catch a bass. I mean, I think we're lucky. Look, it's hard. It's hard when you work, and you guys know this. When you work and you take care of a collection, you're up at 2 and 3 in the morning and doing stuff, and you're living on 4 hours sleep, and raising kids and trying to be fair to the people you love. Yeah. It's a very hard mix, but it can be done. And I'm not big on lazy people and people who don't want to put that effort into it. If you're going to have a collection, man, you better put the effort into that collection. You better take care of them. You better have a clean cage. If you've got too many snakes, you've got too many snakes.
Yeah.
Some people can take care of 200 snakes, 400 snakes, 1,000 snakes. Some people can't. And I think it's up to all of us to do it right. I have no problems putting a snake in a box. It's the perfect pet for a kid. You can go away for a week and come back. It's not like a dog. Snake will spend 90% of its time usually in that hide box, and you keep it clean and clean water and enough space. I have no problems with that. I have problems with the care of any kind of animal, and you guys have seen it, and I have too. And we need to be outspoken, and we can do that in a nice way. I mean, some people are just overwhelmed and they jump all in, and they're going to get rich overnight and all this kind of stuff. And it's the wrong way to get into this,
There's always a cordial way to tell people they're wrong. And that's something that's a little lost on social media these days.
Sure.
But there is definitely a way to do it. I was going to kind of interject when you were talking about maybe finding a snake or having one of these kind of moments, these standout treasured moments, and your friends aren't there. That's kind of a thing I've struggled with. Is I grew up without the internet. I'm of the age where I didn't have it. And, Greg, I'm guessing you didn't either.
Hey, listen. When the Princess phone came out, that you could hold in your hand, man, that was a Cadillac. That was pretty cool stuff, man.
But it's so we obviously, like, the world is inundated with social media now, and I've kind of spoken at length on this podcast and others about my views on social media and where I think it could take us and where I think it can't. And one of the kind of things that has happened now is I feel like I've made some of my best friends. 2 of them are here right now, and they're 1,000 miles away from me, right? Mm-hmm. Justin's in South Carolina, Joe's in California. I'm in South Texas, right? We make a triangle that covers the entirety of the United States.
Well, that's kind of my relationships with my best friends too.
And sometimes I feel like I can go have one of those moments, and through a couple pictures and a couple words, I do get to share it with my best friends.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it feels like they're still 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know. I did a phone call, like a video chat thing in the group chat the other day when I flipped that corn. And Brandon, everyone thought I pocket dialed, so no one answered. But like Brandon Valentine answered, and he's in Arizona, and Dominique hopped on for a second. But yeah, I was like, immediately, I was like, I got to share this. It's found a corn. So
yeah, when we started, everything was snail mail.
Yeah.
And, I got into rosy boas years ago. It's how I met my best friend, Gary Kiesler. And, I would wait for people to send pictures of locality stuff. And it was very exciting. And It was very primitive. I built my own cages, my own hide boxes. There was no industry. You did it yourself, and you learned everything from the beginning. People didn't know how to breed snakes when I started. And I write about that, in this third book. It's just a fact. Nobody knew how to breed much of anything, and we kept snakes, and so a lot of late night conversations with some wonderful people that aren't here anymore, and so I've been very privileged to see it from the very beginning, and to this point. And I shake my head and I go, wow, who would ever know? And I think it's a good thing, as long as people do it right. And I'd like to see a little bit more human kindness in our industry, and a little less the social media crap that makes it on there. And so
there is a lot of crap out there.
Yeah, there really is. And of course that's almost true with anything. But so there's a little topic I want to talk about here with colubrids real quickly.
Sure, absolutely.
So and it kind of involves the corn snake thing and some other stuff. So we have this thing in the industry where you have the morph people. We've created a pink snake and a white snake and the snake, and we've combined genes. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I'm in the field with Bern Bechtel thinking the same thing. We're just fast forwarding genes. We're not creating genes. We're just, Gregor Mendel would think this is like incredible. This is like, wow, this is really cool. As long as you're honest about what you're doing, I don't see any problem with it. But you have this group of people, the more people, against the quote locality specific people, who can kind of turn their nose up at the morph people, and you see this all the time. And I have both. I have strict locality stuff. I have morph stuff. So I want to make something clear to everybody. So we need to kind of stop this kind of infighting thing. So first of all, for all of you locality specific people who are, poo-pooing the idea of anybody else having some kind of, snake, combining a couple genes, you're really not a locality person. And I ask this question all the time.
I hope
so. We'll take an Okatee corn snake, for example. The Okatee corns, I have some lineage that goes back for 40 years or so, and they're beautiful snakes, but they're not like anything that we caught back there or what you'll catch today, because we line breed those things. And what I ask people when they have locality stuff, I say, do you hold back the 5s, or do you keep the 10s in your clutch? Well, we all keep the 10s. I mean, I keep the 10s. You look at that snake, I'm keeping that one. And we line breed these things, and over 30, 40 years, we have, quote, the Okatee corn snake, things that are just insanely beautiful. I have big black borders. We've refined all the qualities that we like. I would challenge people to call that locality. If you're a true locality person, you're holding back the average snake, the 5s, and you're breeding what the average snake looks like, and that's the true locality. And there's nothing wrong with what we're doing, but it's this attitude that I'm only a locality person, and I try to very nicely approach that and say, well, are you really? Let's talk about this. Let's see if you're really you have that average snake, which is really good enough. But look, I pull the 10s out of my clutch. I keep them, because that's what we do. And if you're honest, it's probably what 95% of people do.
And there's that weird idea, and it's popped up, and with a lot of people that I know and work with locality stuff. At what point does it stop being, Nueces County, Milamorum, and does it start being the locality?
Threshold.
Yeah. At what point does that locality become your bedroom, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. It's all tied into that. I use, I knew Brian Box's dad. Brian Box breeds, and I was really into Alterna for a long time. I was out there, and Brian Box breeds probably, I would think, the best black gap, quote, Alternas
Yeah.
You know, and this isn't a slam with Brian. I've said this before, but those snakes are so damn beautiful and so perfect. And look, I spent a lot of years looking out there.
Yeah.
Never found one black cat.
Oh man, yeah.
And you know, I lived out there, and so you know the white that you find in that locality in the snakes and stuff, that's all been perfected.
Yeah.
And the stuff that he hatches is just insanely incredible. And it's not that you couldn't find something that looks like that, but you probably never will because they're just so good.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's the attitude that's wrong. The people can't separate themselves and say, I'm truly just this locality person. And I don't deal, quote, say I don't deal with that shit or that crap. You know, I don't, that's not locality. Well, there's nothing wrong with it because you're not really doing locality either. I mean, I draw my lines, hybridization, lots of other things. There's things I don't particularly care for, but I produced, you know, the first albino bull snakes, the first snow bull snake ever, and Norm Dam and I worked on this project, and you know, you just did the normal thing back then. Well, we got an albino, we got an Henry, we're going to make that beautiful 1 in 16 ugly slug that just looks yellow, you know. But we did all that, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're just fast forwarding some of the genes, and the problem comes is when people aren't honest about things. You need to be able to say what you did and why you did it, and this stuff isn't hopefully, you know, floating around in the wild. It's within the hobby, and I think it's okay. Bern Bechtel would have just, and he did. He'd stop by tables and he'd go, "Golly, this is just incredible." And people would come up to him and say, "Hey, if I breed this to this, what am I going to get?" And he goes, "I don't know. Breed it and call me and show me a picture." You know, he's just so excited, and I kind of feel the same way. So
that's awesome.
You know,
yeah. There's this the locality to morph thing. I think all three of us have locality stuff, and we have morph stuff, and you know, me and Justin even took some morph stuff and plugged it into wild caught for corns, and we wanted to see what if we took the tessera gene and put it into wild caught corns, what it would really start looking like, and we produced some. Well, he produced, and we've shared some amazing animals.
Well, how exciting is that?
Yeah.
When something pips and you're sitting there, you're dead tired. And you want to poke it out, but you don't. You sit there and you sit there and you sit there, and you can't sleep. And you go back and look at that egg, and all of a sudden this half the snake pops out. And you go, "Oh my God, this is just the coolest thing in the world." Well, that's a great thing, I think.
Yeah,
that's a great feeling. And you haven't really done anything wrong. And I'll argue that. I can argue that all night long in many different venues and avenues and stuff. So I think that's okay. And it's just kind of exploring genetics. You know, we don't make the genes, we just fast forward them.
Yeah, that's, I think the species that this conversation draws me so much to is Leonis. I have a huge collection of Leonis. And I just love taking the absolute most different looking snakes and plugging them together and saying, what is this going to look like? I don't know. Nobody knows. And then you get to sit there and watch them hatch. And they're all different. And it's
just great. It's
the best.
It's a really cool feeling. Yeah,
absolutely.
But it's a cool thing. And corn snakes certainly started all of that, you know. And,
sure.
When, you know, Bern, it was got his first corn snakes in 1953. And I think it was 53, 57, 59. I think that's when he produced. No, that's when he got his first albino corn. He got it from a guy in South Carolina, and I think it was 61. I wrote it down. Yeah, 61. He produced hets and stuff. And, you know, what an exciting time. And I got a pair of albino corn snakes at the very start from a guy in Canada. And they came out of the Burns stuff, some of the hets, I think. And Louis Porras is one of my best friends. Just I have immense respect for Louis. Probably knows more about snakes than anybody I know, academic or not. And Louis called me up and said, I can get you a pair. They're expensive. And they were. I said, "Oh, by all means, I want these things." And God, I remember looking at those albino corn snakes, and I just said, "Wow, this is just remarkable." And to walk around and watch the way things have evolved, and I just find it fascinating. It's
amazing
it's
stuff.
crazy. I mean, I've got some corn snakes now. I'm taking the liberty as an old guy of labeling them myself. There's a lot of genetic makeup and stuff, and I don't follow all that. But I call them unicolor corns. I've got a solid green one, all corn snake.
Yeah.
I have a solid shark repellent orange one, and I have a solid gray one with a little bit of an orange head, and Lee has got a solid blue one. So the chromatophores are these things are displaying things that you never see in corn snakes. And how did that happen? Where's that going? And I find it just remarkable. It's just crazy. I mean, there's nothing better than a regular corn snake. But I'm looking at a green corn snake in a box that's 2 years old, and it's green. It's green. It's a lovely shade of green.
You need to make.
I find that fascinating, and like we were talking about the palmetto morph. I mean, how in the world does you could put down 1,000 scenarios not creating something that cool?
Well, just the sheer probability that someone was there at that moment to happen to come across it in the first place.
Yeah, there were 3. The first one was killed, and the woman that owned the pigeon farm, as Don, if I remember correctly, told the story. She said, "Well, she didn't like people killing snakes in there," and she said, "Don't kill any more snakes." And so somebody saw another one that looked just like that. It was a juvenile, and it slipped through the floorboards and got away. Mm. And then there was a third one. So this is a simple recessive trait. It was established there. So there was an original animal, and that was established there. So there were 3, and the one that she kept, she did her homework. She started investigating and finally got to Don, and I think she won something like $100,000 or something. I don't know exactly. I think it was around 12 grand or something that he bought it for and started, and of course made hets and snakes, but a remarkable story. Mm-hmm. Just a great thing, and there are finds like that. I think in your lifetime everybody gets 1 or 2 couple things. I had a very famous 2-headed corn snake hatch 40 years ago, made it at San Diego Zoo, and June Embry, the one that, you guys are too young. She's on Johnny Carson show all the time with animals. And it was their favorite snake to have on the show was their 2-headed corn snake. And I thought I'd never get rid of it. I had it for 3 years. Yeah, that's the snake. Yeah. The remarkable thing about this bicephalic snake is that both heads fed, and it had the cervical break was pretty far down the neck, where you don't see a fused skull or something, or cervical vertebra. So both heads fed, and it was a delight. But Louis got involved with the San Diego Zoo, and zoos won't give you anything out of the zoo unless they want something. And all those zoo cap rules get broken because they want something. Trust me, I know. I've gotten a lot of snakes out of zoos because they wanted something from me, and that was one thing. It was a big 3-way deal, and I got the first vertebralis that were breeding. I got the first leucistic Lindenheimeri back in the day when nobody had those, and I got a lot of pairs of snakes from the San Diego Zoo.
That's awesome.
Because they wanted that snake. And back at a time when they would say, well, we're not allowed to do that. We don't deal with the public, and we never do, and we won't do that. And you get a phone call after a conversation going, well, what do you want, Craig? And it's like, what do you got?
Yeah.
So I did let it go, but it was good because it really turned a lot of kids on. I did a lot of school talks with that snake, and my pay for doing the talk was that every kid had to draw me a picture of a two-headed snake. And I had hundreds of these things for years. And this one kid, I remember this, it was really cool. He drew a three-headed snake. He had to one up the two-headed snake. So a lot of stories about that snake. And so you do it long enough, and there are those special snakes, you know, that you happen on, you find, or you
absolutely
produce, and you know, golly, what a thrill that was. So
well, Craig, on this conversation of having you produce that snake, let's go back to the beginning. When did corn snakes fall into your hands, and where did you go from there?
Well, I'll tell you, I was a Boy Scout, and still pretty young. I think I was 12, and for me, the literature back then was very limited, and there were a couple little books, and most of the pictures were colorizations. You know, and there's that famous picture of the corn snake wrapped around the rat in the barn with the hay. And man, every kid my age that saw a corn snake would say, golly, it's just so cool. And by the way, you know, that corn snake name came from the association, the belly patterns of black and white, and sometimes yellow, was very much like Indian corn.
Yeah. And
so the assignment of corn snake kind of eventually made it to that as kind of a local thing. But so I was at a Boy Scout camporee, and I got a corn snake from a guy who gave it to me, and it was the most exciting thing. And I had a little snake collection at that time, and man, I went crazy, and then read everything I could read, and then started, looking. I lived in Fort Lauderdale at the time, and then I started finding corn snakes, and I found, golly, through the years, I found areas with huge populations of corn snakes, and which was nice. And I never commercially collected. I didn't, I'd pull one or two out, the best thing sort of thing. And another little story is that I used to hunt the old Tamiami Trail down in Miami. And before Alligator Alley opened up, Tamiami Trail was the road from the east part of Florida to west part of Florida at the end of the state. And when they built Alligator Alley, they chopped up the trail where you couldn't get access to it or drive on it. And it left these, mile sections of pavement. And of course, no cars on there. And I'd go and walk those at night. And I started finding these corn snakes that were kind of gray and silver and red. They were very different. And, the Miami corn thing, I didn't call them that, I called them a couple other things when I got them, but there was a huge population of those down there, and they were very different, as kind of silver and red. And I would notice also in the Australian pines when I would walk those roads at night, I'd look up in the pines and you'd see mats of peeled green snakes, rough green snakes. Mm-hmm. And you see their yellow bellies, and there'd be 6 or 7 of them in a mat at night. And you go down, another half mile, there'd be another mat of them. And I just thought that was fascinating, a really cool snake. So I had a guy doing PhD work once who said, God, I need to find him. I go, well, I'll tell you how to find him. Go out at night with a flashlight. Go down to South Florida, those old Australian pines, and walk with your flashlight looking up.
About how high off the ground were they?
I'm sorry?
Like how high off the ground are we talking with those?
They were really pretty high. And that's an interesting thing with snakes, because you don't see too many snakes. I mean, you will in Africa and some other places, but too many snakes that are really high up, mm-hmm. Kind of, low limbs, low trees, bushes and things. But these were really, you'd have to climb or have a pole or something to get up there. And they were all matted together. I just found that fascinating. And, you do this long enough and my cage, I do have a drawer rack that I built, but my cages are glass fronts, and I visualize a lot of things. And back when I had, all Venomous, I had a lot of canteals, and I had tailori, some of the first tailori, and of course we all know the copperheads and Kistrodon caudal their tails. They're little green and yellow tails, and they caudal them, as an attractor for prey. But what we didn't know is that adults still do that too. And I remember I presented this at some meeting, and somebody said, bullshit, and you're just seeing a tail moving. And I said, no, I'm telling you, these were adults coddling their tails at night, and in a rhythmic fashion. It wasn't sexual; it was all prey-related stuff. I think that was one of the first times people had noticed that. And so, so herpetoculture has added a lot to herpetology. That's another big dividing. I went to, HIS this year and stuff, and it needs young blood. It needs new blood. It needs you guys and younger people and stuff. And there's this divide in herpetology and herpetoculture that is kind of nonsense, because herpetoculture has provided a lot of information to herpetology. And of course, we study herpetology as herpetoculturists. So I'd like to see that mended a little bit.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt on that.
Yeah.
At what point did the hunt club come into the
early 70s, and went out and just was mesmerized, and it really hadn't caught up too much. There were a few hunters. Howie was out there. I'll tell you a story about Howie. Howie was out there, and he got arrested on private land, and they took him to the Ridgeland jail. And this was a jail that had a sheriff and one deputy. It was like Barney Fife.
Pretty sure it's still like that.
Yeah. So there were two, and there was one jail, and they put him in jail. And if you know Howie, Howie's obnoxious. I love him to death. There was a tin cup in there for water, and he takes the tin cup and he starts raking it across the jail bars, saying, I know my rights. I'm being deprived of water and food. And he just kept going on. He's laughing. And the sheriff couldn't take it in the other office. He goes, get him the hell out of here. I can't listen to this stuff all day. and cited him with a ticket. He had to come back there and pay the fine and all that stuff. But I thought that was kind of funny. But no, it was early on. And it was really respectful back then. That's before people started tearing up property. And I was lucky that I was in, there was a old motel there called Cactus Motel, and there was a breakfast joint there. And some snake hunters would be in there, a lot of turkey hunters back then in there. And there was this old man, and he looked at Linda, and Linda said something to him very nice. And he walked over and he said, you're just a wonderful looking young lady. And he sat down for a minute, and he was a plantation manager. Had been his whole life one of the biggest plantations out there near Belhala and out near somewhere, I don't know. And we got to know him, and he said, well, I'll tell you what, I don't do this, but he said, he winked at me, he said, I really like your wife. I don't know about you. Your hair's a little too long. I had a big braid back then. And real nice guy. And he said, I'm gonna leave you a key at the gate. I'll tell you where to find it. Lock the door when lock the gate when you go back in, and you've got the whole plantation, thousands of acres to yourself. And he said, just don't take my king snakes. That's what he said. He said, I don't like those rattlers, and he didn't like cane brakes, and he knew a little something about snakes. And oh gosh, Lynn and I went there year after year, and there were these old Civil War plantation foundations. We walked around this one foundation and found 5 coiled cane brakes in like 30 minutes around this plantation, just out. And there was evidently a basement, and they probably wintered over there and had come out in the spring. But Oh my gosh, what a wonderful, beautiful place. And the wisteria in the spring, the purple and the smells and the dogwoods and the pines and the burning, the plantation burns. And you guys have seen that. But just, I can't, I mean, I have some great memories in West Texas and California and other places, but golly, man, those early days, that was just so special. I remember Lynn and I found this old log, hollowed out oak log, and I had a little flashlight, nothing like lights you have today, and a little Rayovac thing. And I'm looking down here and I go, golly, it looks like a pile of snakes, but it couldn't be. Well, it was a pile of snakes. I got my hook, and this is the truth. I pulled out copperheads, cane brakes, a hognose, a king snake. There was so many snakes and species of snakes I pulled out of this thing. We've got an old picture somewhere, and they're all on the ground. We kind of left them there, and that was one of those remarkable things. I guess before emergence, and they were all packed in there together. It was crazy. So I have so many memories there. And the tragedy part is, there was a lot of this. There were a lot of corn snakes, and a lot of people got good at collecting corn snakes, and a lot of commercial collectors. And look, I had a couple of friends that were commercial collectors that changed their ways. I learned a lot from Hayward Clamp and from Ricky Walters and people that knew how to find snakes. I never told them their business, but it's not something I was into.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, you look at that picture and go, wow, that's just remarkable. I think I would pluck out the best pair in there and let the rest go. I don't think that's probably what happened, but but back in the day, a lot of corn snakes. So,
yeah, like at what point did it sort of go south? Because I know a lot of people.
Late 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the late 70s, right around 80. A lot of people, people say, "Oh, well, it's all those New Yorkers that came down," and I go, "Well, Carl Caulfield was a New Yorker, and he didn't rape the land." Gary Williamson was down there early on, and a lot of really great people and stuff. But it got to be kind of a money thing, a commercial thing. Oh man, we can go up there and just clean up, and of course a lot of people were buying snakes back then, and and what happened is that people were just really tearing up the land. They really did, and burglarized some places, and so bad taste. They always welcomed us in when we came into town to hunt, just like turkey hunters. But it changed in the 70s, boy. You didn't want to mention you were down there looking for snakes because most landowners didn't want you there.
I feel like that some of that is still sort of lingering around there too. I mean, it's one of the few places in the country, if not one of the only, where sort of there's a like snake people kind of have there's a stigma there, and a I guess a bias maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to group people into a big group. It's kind of hard to separate people. Mm-hmm. It's like people that keep collections in the wrong way, in my opinion. And and it's very easy to group people in, animal rights people, and other people and stuff. It's not that easy. You can't just group everybody into one big lump sum sort of thing. It's the idea of zoos, and I told a story recently. When I was growing up, I wrote about this in the Pituophis book as an example. Ties in a little bit of this. We knew what a killer whale was when I was a kid. The Compton's Encyclopedia, there might have been a picture, but boy, they were a big, tough, nasty thing. They were a killer whale. And, you'd always have those conversations, the toughest animal in the world. And somebody'd say a killer whale. And, and then all of a sudden, there's SeaWorld opens, controversial, of course. And in some ways, yeah, I agree. But Look, I think if you sacrifice a few, you put them in a good zoo and you take good care of them and you give them enough land and stuff, the benefits of saving species starts right there. SeaWorld should be credited with saving the killer whale. Kids grew up generations, your generation grew up and knew them as orcas.
Free Willy.
And when you went to SeaWorld, you bought the little stuffed animal and the T-shirt, and you were all in, and you thought these were the coolest things in the world. And then when legislation came up, people voted to protect them, and they're protected today. And I will tell you that's because of SeaWorld. And, SeaWorld got a lot of shit, and they should have for some stuff.
Yeah.
But look, you sacrificed a few and you educated a whole generation of people. We should pay attention to that. And Dave Barker wrote, and Dave's a very good friend, he's a lifetime friend. And his best book that he has written, in my opinion, is a little very poorly known book. It's a little white book. And it's called
The Invisible Ark.
The Invisible Ark. And I've got the editor's copy and 3 copies. He's going to redo that book.
Oh, wow.
But it's a template for saving everything from an orchid to an elephant on this planet. Plugging in economics and plugging in good old capitalism and yet taking care of animals and breeding animals like we breed animals. And people may laugh at it, but it's actually a brilliant template for doing this and how to do it. And, in a day when, species are disappearing, and a lot of it's just because, people can't afford to buy the lands that they need to stay there. But in the meantime, you can plug some of these ideas in that he has that certainly would preserve species, very, very interesting thing. So off track a little bit, but I wanted to put that thing in there about the orca, and it's the same thing about indigos and other things. And
well, surely, I mean, and I don't think this is necessarily even off track, Craig, with what you're talking about. Earlier we had talked a little bit about staying outside of politics, but certain programs right now are going to be getting shut down or are already shut down on conservation of animals that maybe not everybody finds important. So let's say that I know for a fact the Louisiana pine snake, some of the conservation efforts for that have already been cut. And I believe
2 of the people in my book that helped write that chapter and stuff are no longer employed.
Yeah, and so
and in a big sweep, and without again getting into politics, I can't speak for the rest of it, but I can certainly speak for this. It's a horrible thing because so much work has been put in to saving certain things, and
Sure.
And to the common man, what good is a species of lizard or this or that? But you guys know, you lose a species, you don't get a new one back.
You don't get it back.
And we lose them every year, and everything is dependent on something else and on something else, and it's something that we should all be cognizant and aware of and champion. Everything that we can do to save these things. And
I mean, so much of that responsibility is now going to fall on the shoulders of the captive breeders, right?
Well, it is. People used to say, "Oh, nonsense! You're captive breeding to save something." Well, actually, that's become a reality now. There are certain species, critically endangered stuff, round island boas, other things, critically endangered. We've proven that we can breed things, and look, when a time comes and somebody can have the habitat and land, and we know it's preserved, it's not going to be taken away, and the money's there to do that. The people that are breeding, you can start programs for re-release, and the people say reptiles, the parasite transfer and this and that, and I go, actually, really do your homework. That's kind of bullshit. You can raise and re-release things. Louisiana Pine Snake Project has released several hundred pine snakes with 4 zoos. And they've done a very good job at that, and you can bring something back, and we've proven that. I'm very proud of herpetoculture because we've proven that we can breed some very difficult things, and I think there's room for people to sell and make some money, and I'd like to see, part of some of that channel also into, preserving certain things in certain areas, and like the Kentucky pine.
Yeah.
I hope this can come to fruition, and so I'm proud of you guys. I'm proud of most of us that have done this right, and look, the people who don't like us and they think that it's cruel, I can argue all kinds of things. I can argue for the people that have a horse and they have a pasture. I could argue the fact that I will bet you that horse would rather not have a 200-pound person sitting on his back in a saddle. Yeah. I can argue with you that if you have a Labrador Retriever, and I do, and you're older and you live in an apartment and all you do is walk that dog, that's worse than what I'm doing. That dog needs to run. We can talk about this all day long. We are a planet. I call this the planet Snake Tune, and we're a planet of pets, and we have this fascination, with animals and stuff. And the naysayers for the snake people, if you take a big breath and you're really nice and you sit down and have a constructive conversation, you can say, well, do you have a pet? Most people do. Yeah, I've got some fish in a tank. Well, I could argue those fish would rather be swimming around in a lake, but they're probably not going to get eaten when they're in the tank. Yeah. You can go back and forth and back and forth. And so at some point in time, you just have to draw a line and say, I'm perfectly comfortable with what I do. I don't hide it. I don't make excuses. I treat my animals really well, and I think that's okay. And a lot of good is come out of our industry. So, look at Hamilton's pond turtles. Wayne Hill and just a couple people brought those back from the verge of extinction, and now people breed hundreds and hundreds of them, and they have been re-released. So,
Well, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, Justin.
Mine's a segue into the corn tier and like the ethical crossroads of keeping those versus
sure.
But if we can get into
I was just gonna say that there's a little bit of this ideology, especially what you're talking about, Greg, is that us as a people, us as humans, are a young species on the evolutionary scale, and we're sitting here. And we've claimed the rights to everything. We've claimed that we are the ones that get to make the decisions because we're the ones in power, we're the ones in strength, we're the ones with the intelligence. But I'm pretty sure that in eons, right? Who knows what day humans may be gone from this planet, and a lot of these species are still going to be here, and maybe they're going to evolve into other things. And that's the beautiful thing about evolution. But the snakes are still going to be here. The alligators, the crocodiles, the sharks, the things that you don't like, the spiders you're scared of.
It's a very good point. It's a good point. I'll use some of that too. I mean, it's a very good point. We're one chromosome away from a chimpanzee. I mean, sure. We are the caretakers of this planet because we're supposedly at the top, and what a mess. What a mess we've become. I mean, we could do so much better. And but yeah, when it's all over, there'll be a corn snake somewhere, if it hasn't been nuked and grown 3 heads, it'll be crawling around somewhere till the end of time. And we're all interconnected in a way. And that's not some mystical statement, but we really are. We're very interconnected, and people that don't make that association and their whole life is wrapped around a golf game, I guess that's okay for them. But it's not okay for me. And there's so much more in a short lifespan. I'm, like I said, 77. I wish I had 20 more years. I have so much stuff I want to do and go see and look at, and so there's some responsibility here. And I think there's room for all of us to speak a little bit more to that. You can have a collection and you can be a conservationist. You can sell a snake and you can be a conservationist. This lumping people into these different categories, it's a little more complicated than that. So,
absolutely.
But the ubiquitous corn snake, I've gone full circle. All these different snakes. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, and I don't know how much I know about snakes. I will say that I think I've probably kept more species of snakes than most anybody in my lifetime, and I find it fascinating that I started pretty much with a corn snake, and I'm back with some corn snakes, and golly, what a snake! What a snake!
It's a great animal, isn't it?
They don't get too big. They're just beautiful. My grandson has grown up with a little corn snake. I gave him that thing is 5.5 feet and huge, of course, obese, and he's had it for 12 years now, I guess. And I'll tell you a quick story. I'm a storyteller, as you know. We talk about big corn snakes. This is good for corn snake people. So I was in Okatee in the 70s, and I was walking a burn, and it just rained. And I walked around this big pine, and there was a kind of a crevice in it, in the side of it, and I could see a big coil of a corn. And I pulled this corn out, and when I finally measured it later on, it was 5'11".
Wow.
That's a fact.
Huge.
30 minutes later, crawling out of a little divot hole, in the burn, was a tape measured 6-foot corn. They were a male and female, the largest corns by far I've ever found. I found a lot of corn snakes, 30 minutes apart. I kept them both. And Louis sent those to, I didn't sell them. Louis sent those to the Berlin Zoo. They wanted corn snakes. So they had a 6-foot pair of corn snakes. Because people say, have you ever seen a 6-foot corn snake? And I said, I really have. 5'11".
Monsters.
And the biggest corn snake I've collected was it wasn't that long. It was, maybe 5'4", 5'5". Was on St. George Island,
Okay.
Off West Coast, Florida. And it's funny because I'd walk with the kids at night on the beach because there's crabs and all kinds of stuff, to see on the beach at night. But we noticed there were a lot of rats. And there were rats down on there eating dead fish and eating stuff. Mm-hmm. And I said, golly, a lot of rats, And sure enough, next night I found a corn snake. And this thing was so obese. And it was simple. That thing just crawled out of a hole, went down there, found a rat. They were all over the beach. And I just laughed. I said, golly, this thing looks like it was somebody's only snake who fed it 4 times a week. It was just obese.
Loving life.
Yeah. So, a lot of tidbit stories that aren't interesting to most people. But, the ubiquitous corn snake. I can't think of just a more wonderful species. And, people go through that phase of getting a little bit more sophisticated and leaving those things to get what's really cool and hot. And what's really cool is what's right in front of you,
I like to have the best of both worlds. Like, it's nice to have the stuff like corns that's just uncomplicated, just, enjoyable. And then to have the stuff that requires a little bit more attention to detail.
Absolutely.
It's great to have both. Like, it's nice to have.
It really is. It really is. And I have that, and I've had that. I like the challenges too, of keeping some difficult things and,
gives you the right amount of excitement, to have the stuff that's a little more stressful. But
well, it is. But when you're successful in getting something to start feeding, or if you propagate something, it's a little difficult and stuff. It's really rewarding when you put that effort in and that happens, and very exciting. And I'm just very fortunate. I'm very lucky to have had this in my life, and gotta love the corn snake people, man. I only go to Daytona. I've gone to every show there. It's not that far away. And Casey Lassick, a lot of friends come in. We get together and stuff, and like going there. But I love the corn snake people. Do you keep anything besides corns? No, just corns. And I go, well, there's other cool snakes out there. No, I just corn snakes, you know. So, yeah.
You know, Craig, talking about getting back with corns and talking about colubrids in general, you've talked about the immense collection you've had over your kind of lifetime, your history of doing this.
Yeah.
You said earlier that your collection has kind of mitigated itself more to more colubrids, a little bit, smaller snakes, stuff that's a little bit more manageable. Have you kind of found yourself as you go into your snake room, it's a little bit more of a comfort zone? These are the animals that kind of have always stood out through your tenure.
You know, I don't know. You know, I've always my snake rooms are very different. They're like furniture quality. I'm a decent woodworker, and
I think we've got some pictures we'll share here.
Yeah,
I'm pulling them up right now.
And I look. I have all my memorabilia stacked over stuff, and I love, you know, going in my rooms, and I love all the work and the detail that went into it, and yeah, those cages are 40 years old. They're laminated on the bottom. They're birch, made the light hoods and everything, and they worked really well. But I have stuff stacked on them. People go, so you have to take all this stuff off when you open the cage? And I go, yeah, but I don't mind doing it. So for me, it's so much part of my life. I wouldn't know how to act if I didn't get up with a cup of coffee and walk in a snake room and turn the lights on and go, wow, you know.
Favorite thing to do on a Saturday morning after working all week is to get that coffee before the family's awake and walk right in there.
Oh man, I was with what I did in oncology. I was on call 24/7, and I'd get called out late at night, and I'd come back home, walk in the snake room, grab a beer, turn the light on, and just sit there when it was quiet and things coiled, and just go, this is just the coolest thing in the world. And I really don't care if nobody else gets it. And there was a day when there was only a few of us. Talk about weird. If you had a snake collection, in the early 70s, yeah, that was a living room in the house that I made into.
Look at that chondro.
The snake room. Oh, I did chondros at the same time Trooper Walsh was doing them, right at the very beginning. That was a hard thing. People didn't really know how to breed them. And my first clutch, this true story, was 32 eggs.
Whoa.
Wow.
How's that? And it wasn't about the money, but it kind of was. It was a payday.
Hell of a payday.
I went to Daytona, and I got gallon jars, and I came back from West Texas, and I'd cut all this madrona. Madrone's kind of got a red bark to it. It's really cool. And I put and I had red neonates and chocolate brown and yellow ones. And I put one in each jar, and I put them on the table, and I think it was like $1,000 a piece on the jars. And somebody came up. I won't get into that whole story, but somebody came up and said, well, I want to buy them all. And I said, well, that's, I think I had 16 there, or 15. It's a lot of money back then. And I have 4 kids, with their hands out for college money. And I said, okay. And I made him pay cash, which he didn't like. But I said, well, you just have to go find the cash. Anyway, paid cash for him. But he got the last laugh because he took them over and put them on their table and upped at 500, and they sold out. So, back in the day, you just didn't know about stuff. But that was really exciting. And then getting them to eat, late at night, I'd talk to Trooper and everybody else go, yeah, man, these things just half of them won't eat. And I talked to Louie, and Louie said, well, go out back and find a bird nest. And you can do this with difficult corn snakes too, other things. Find a bird nest, has little broken eggshells in it, put it in your freezer in a Ziploc bag. Take a pinky and frozen pink and a little thaw and rub it around the bottom of that nest. And it's like crack. Every condo that didn't feed jumped off that limb and grabbed that pinky. And to this day, I have all these little tricks, and I've even used that on, once in a while you'll have a corn snake just won't eat, and it's always a cool corn snake.
It's once a year, and it's the best one.
Corn snakes, I want this one to eat, and and that works. It works a lot of the time. So,
I need to go find a bird nest right now.
yeah, just put it in a Ziploc. You'll be surprised. It's kind of crazy. It startled me so much because I tried so much stuff on these chondros. And back then everybody said, well, you can't sex them because you'll kink their tails. That was the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, who in the world would pay $1,000 for a snake that they don't know what sex it is? You're going to buy a pair. And I did a lot of medical stuff. So, I'm used to working with my hands. And I figured out a way to probe them. And they weren't that hard. I never kinked a tail. And so for a while, I was the only guy selling, sexed baby chondros, which worked for me pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. But there's so many stories, but I've tried to integrate, my hobby into part of my life. And of course I've had a very tolerant partner. My wife's been very, very tolerant, and you know how that goes. And I write about this in the Pituophis book too.
A lot.
Fun. That freezer with what's in that bag, that, that stomach contents survey I was going to do, or, the pinkies, or my most famous story is that Linda was out with kids and she had a brand new food processor. And this is right when we were starting to boil pinks and change pinks and, do things with pinks. And I put these frozen pinks in her food processor and made this pinky pate, thing. And she walked in the door as the top exploded, and there were pinky feet on, this is true, in the kitchen ceiling, and little tails because it popped up. And she walked in without even getting mad. And she goes, wow, would that be my new $500 food processor? And I went, yeah, but I'm going to bleach it and clean it out. I'm so sorry you weren't here. And she goes, well, you have a new food processor, and I'm going to have one at the end of the week. So that's a true story. So, yeah. And we all have those stories. We take it for granted, the things we have, and it takes a very special person that loves you in a very special way to share that joy. I mean, they see that in you. They see that passion.
Yeah, there's this moment of genius we all have in our reptile lives that we don't always take into consideration everybody else in the household while you're doing the thing.
Well, it's normal. It's normal for us.
Yeah.
I mean, people come into a house and something, and it always comes around. Yeah, I hear you have some snakes, and you open a door, and they go, what? And when you think about it, it's probably one of the most bizarre things. If you're not, if you don't know anything about snakes, it's a rather bizarre thing. But it's very normal to me. It's my whole life has been. It started. I always tell a story. My first snake cages, I realized back then TV sets had a big picture tube, and when it burned out, they throw the TV away. Mm-hmm. And if you took the picture tube out, it had a glass front and it was a square box on legs. It made a perfect snake cage because you put some beaver board on the back, and I had a room stacked with Motorola's and Zeniths, and my mom and I had a wonderful mom who tolerated that. And you drove me around, and I go, hey, there's one, Mom. And we'd put it in the old Buick and bring it home. And, probably saved me from getting in a lot of trouble. I mean, I was all into the snake thing in an early time, but, and you guys have done the same thing. You integrate this into your life, and hopefully you include people you love and your family and things, and share those things. And when they love you, they see that passion and the excitement that you have, and they share in that. It's a lot of people don't have that. They just have a relationship,
Especially, I think all of us here consider it is we had that passion before the relationship even started.
Well, yeah, that's a point. I had a room full of Venomous stuff, and I really loved Linda, and I said, guys, this is going to be a deal breaker. At what point in time do I get into the snake thing here? And she's in this old house I'd rented, big room, and I cracked the door and turned the lights on. And I was waiting for it, the usual reaction, like, oh no, and she went, wow. She goes, wow, what are those? And a pair of rhinos I had, and pretty nice. And she was just fascinated. And my heart was pounding so fast. It was the best sex I ever had in my life, man. I brought my girlfriend over, and she loved my snake collection, and it was over. It was done, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm very lucky. I'm very fortunate there. And of course, my kids just grew up. I mean, their friends would come over and go, "What? Wow!" And they go, "Yeah, it's just the snakes. That's just the snake room. That's just they grew up with that."
Yeah.
But they weren't traumatized. Like I told you, they look back on some of those vacations when other kids were at Disney World and they were out in the middle of, the desert looking for Alterna, and they look back now and they say, God, that was some of the best summers we ever had. And so I'm proud of that.
That's absolutely something to be proud of. Yeah.
Justin, did you still have your question about the South Carolina corns?
I don't know. It's the ethical crossroads of keeping things you come across.
Mm-hmm.
So over the weekend, I managed to come across 2 corns
because
I live on Ladies Island here in Beaufort.
Which island?
Ladies.
Okay.
It's near St.
I hunted James Island a lot.
Okay. Yeah, that's a ways
I
up.
coined the khaki corn thing. I started finding the corns that looked, kind of khaki colored over there.
Yeah. So I have a small group already that I've been collecting over the years. And usually if it's like a yearling or smaller, I'll hold on to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm weird about keeping adults because I'm of the opinion like they've survived Darwinism. They've made it to that size.
Sure.
Like, why take that out? One of them I found on my parents' property, which is 5 acres, sort of in the woods. That one I feel a little more guilty about holding on to. The other one was found 3 doors down from me in my neighborhood. And it's a pretty good size one, like probably the biggest Ladies on one I've ever come across. And that one I don't feel as bad about because my concern was like, okay, I'm going to go re-release this thing. And then 2 days later, I'm going to see it around the corner on the street, waffled. Or, even with both of them, like I turn around and let them go. And then for all we know, a hawk could come down and grab them and take them away. Like, where do you sit on that fence as far as?
Oh, you're right. You're right. Where
it's so tough.
People my age, if there's any my age still doing this, we've all gone through that. And, I say, I can't take this big female. I can't do this. I can't do that sort of thing. But, in the end, I've left way more snakes than I've taken, but I've taken some adult snakes and things. And because I came to, that point in my life where it's just, for me, it was okay. I'm going to take good care of it. I don't really have a problem. I have a problem when somebody goes out and they're dragging 6, 7 snakes, off somewhere, and you're impacting a local population. Well, I've got I live on a peninsula that goes out on a lake. It's the other side is Tall Timbers Research Station, and so it's a private plantation.
Yeah,
and it's really a cool place. And I have caught 3 piebald corn snakes on this peninsula.
I remember seeing pictures of those. I think you posted.
The last one actually had a white blotch. The other ones had some white scales. And this last one, I said, golly, boy, it's established here.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it, and I let the last one go. And some guys were going crazy. They go, man. I go, no. I feel really good. They're on this peninsula, and it's an established population. I think it's really cool. I can live without that. So I can do that, but I can also sometimes find something that's big, and I may not keep it for long, but I'm gonna keep it. I'm very comfortable with how I keep snakes and why. And if you have that debate about taking that snake, you can elongate this into the whole thing. Should you even keep a snake? Should it be in a box? It gets exhausting. And at some point in time, I think you just have to say, look, maybe controversial, but I'm comfortable with this. I'm going to do this. I don't have a problem with doing it, but I do it right. I do it right. I take care of it. Cool snake. We corn snakes, you could have a 100 corn snake collection of locality corns that are all completely different.
Everyone would be different.
They're some of the prettiest corn snakes I've ever seen came from around MacDill Air Force Base down near Tampa. And they just blew away at Okatee, back in the day. I don't, you can say it, oh, that's an ugly corn snake, but I don't look at it that way. I find each one, I look at the habitat, I look at the snakes and I go, wow, how come these are that different? And for me, coastal plain corn snakes, the South Carolina area is a very different corn snake. I look at morphology. It's not just phylogenetics and zoogeography. I look at morphology. And I will tell you, when I look at a South Carolina corn around Okatee, and I look at that head, and I look at a head of corn snake from North Florida or Central Florida, I can see a difference. I'm not trying to split things or anything, but some of these regional variations take on a little bit of a difference. And some of the insular forms are really cool. The key corns were great. The old pink rat snake, it was a legitimate name, and it was a different subspecies back in the day from the Keys. I've kept them from Duck Key and some of the other keys they're just spectacular. Like the Diamondbacks, they've taken on their own little form and color. And but to your point, I wouldn't. If you found something that works into that, I'd keep that snake. And if you don't keep it forever, I'd keep it I'd enjoy that snake. It's not like if you take it back there, the argument is, well, it'll never adapt or something. That's bullshit. It's going to do just fine.
Yeah, it's that, again, the ethical sort of crossroads of like, you have something that's already made it past the most difficult parts of its life.
It's good.
Yearling and neonates, I don't feel as bad because the likelihood of them getting to that size is probably pretty slim. The fact that it even made it out of the egg in the first place is sort of a.
But Justin, that's really good that you think that way, and I love people that have that feeling. I hunted as a kid, and I remember the last animal I killed a deer, and I have nothing against, by the way, hunters that hunt and do it right, but I watched that deer die, and I've grown to wonder about the need to kill. And for me, I've chosen, I don't want to do that. And every time I kill a mouse, this sounds ridiculous. And I raise my own mice, so I have live mice, and I kill them. I don't use a chamber or anything. I just pinch the cervical spine, and so it's like immediate. But every single one, I always think, I'm killing something that has hair and cool eyes and developed, and it's kind of to what you're speaking. Something grows up, it's adapted to an area. It's made it this far in life, and it's a challenge. Yeah, there's hardly a corn snake that I've ever flipped that I don't pick up, and my first instinct is say, "Oh, I'm going to keep this." Yeah, I'm going to have locality corn snakes from this place, and most people would say, "Well, that's the most butt ugly corn snake I've ever seen." And for me, I'm looking at different key points. I mean, I've had New Jersey corns, I've had Kentucky corns, I've had corns from all over the place, and it's really cool how they take on, their unique little distinct characteristics and stuff. I mean, the normal thing is to look at that chromatophore display, that the sparkling color and the bold pattern and contrast. And that's what most people look at, in the hobby. I want something colorful and contrasting. And that sort of thing. But looking at the snake right there, see, I love that snake. And there's so many things in that snake that I like.
Yeah, they're both in shed too. So this isn't even
it's cool. And look, if I walk around and somebody has a pair of locality corn snakes from some place and they're true locality, that's true locality, and had bred that, I think it's awesome.
It's a fun. To me, it's just the novelty of like this is one from home. Like this is right in my backyard. Like this is it's an insular thing. Like it's an island. I mean, it's a decent sized island, but it's like I find that aspect cool. But then I also find the fact that it's like I literally walked down the street and found probably one of the nicest ones I've seen so far.
And how cool is that?
Yeah.
It's like I wrote in the book. I say you walk down to that empty lot at the end of the block and kick that board over, and once in a while you'll go, oh my gosh, look at that, there's a corn snake.
Well, because I went back and forth on it, so that one that I found next to the tin or under that tin I re-released, and then I went back to my parents that night for dinner, and I was like, let me go see if she's still there. And so I went back to that tin and she was still hanging out there. I was like, okay, you're coming with me. I'll decide whether or not I'm going to keep you full time.
It's meant to be. Yeah.
Well,
have you guys recaptured snakes before, the same snake?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a cane break that was missing its rattle. It lost part of its tail in South Carolina. And I'll bet you I found that thing 4 or 5 times.
I had a group of garters that was living under the same piece of tin for several months.
Yeah. When things are right for a snake, they don't move.
Yeah.
If they've got everything they need. There's a story about, it really has to do with the chronology and the age of rubber boas. And now there are thoughts that rubber boas can live to possibly 100 years.
Really?
Certainly 50, and people have pushed it to 70. But there's a story, and I think it's in Oregon, and this father and son, they'd go up to this farm. It was a family farm on Thanksgiving, and they'd walk up this road, and there was this one big flat rock, and they turned it over, and they found this rubber boa with a very distinct heavy scar up in the neck. And they put it back, and the next year they flipped that rock, and it was there. Well, this went on for 20-something years, and it was an adult, and it was always under that rock, which simply means it had everything it's needed. It could winter under there. It's getting food right around there. It had everything it's needed, undisturbed, thermoregulate, the whole thing. It's perfect. Well, the next generation went on. So they know, in fact, that they were finding that snake. I think it was all but a couple of years they found that snake. And it was, close to 45, 50 years. And the snake was old, or not old, but an adult when they found it. So those things are always valuable, of course, to write up and stuff. But I mean, here again, the age of snakes. I mean, I've had crotalids, rattlesnakes, for close to 30 years. And, I'm sure there's corn snakes. If my grandson's corn snake doesn't die of a massive MI from being so obese.
My dad has a ladies island one that I produced 2 or 3 years ago, and he overfeeds the snot out of it. And every time I see it, I'm like, Jesus, that thing's gonna just have a freaking pulmonary or something.
Well, I keep waiting for the thing to roll. It's just a big, pudgy, good-looking corn snake. It was very broken patterned, and I named those Aztec corns a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of stifled, stifling and stuff. Interesting snake, but for people that just jump over the corn snake thing to get into something, I think they're missing out. I think everybody should have a couple corn snakes for a while.
Yeah, I think everybody should have a couple corn snakes, just regardless. They're great animals.
Whatever else you're keeping, I was going to say the 2 things. One, that family that found that rubber boa every year, like, you rotten lucky bastards. I've been trying to find a rubber boa. I live in their range. I've been trying to find one for 20 years. I've never managed to flip one.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing. I years ago, I lived right outside San Francisco, And
Where?
I would go over to Mount Tamalpais
Okay.
and hunt Dicamptodon, Pacific giant salamanders, which are really cool. That's a big salamander, big brown thing. And find a lot of larvae and occasionally find a salamander. And Jim Nyan took me over there years ago, and it just rained, and we're going along the road that runs along Mount Tamalpais on the base, and you'd see these bright pink lines. They were pink and you very distinct, and they were baby rubber boas. And when they were dropping, we found 5 one night, and Jim found 5 or 6 another night. And it was crazy. All just brand new baby rubber boas, But other than that, I mean, I haven't found them.
That's a great find. Yeah, I think I'm about 60 miles south of San Francisco. And so I've got a really interesting range for what I should be able to find. For the most part, Pacific gophers and, variety of garter snakes all over the place. Which I love.
When I lived there, Tetratania, San Francisco garter snake, was not protected yet federally.
Really?
Yeah. I'm old, and there were 5 places. Only 5 places you could find them. I think it's down to like 3, but there was one out by the airport, and one over by the old stadium, and a friend of mine kind of turned me on to. We went, we found them, and I had them. And when I moved back to Florida, they had just protected them, and I called U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the agent Palmer, I think it was, came out, and he said, well, you were being honest. And I had 3 generations of them. I had babies, and, I had them on pinks. I mean, you could take a piece of fried chicken. Baby garter snakes are crazy. You can be eating a piece of chicken. I mean, cooked chicken. Take a piece of chicken and stick it down there, and one of those garter snakes is going to eat it. And I had 3 generations going, and I said, well, I kind of want to sell them if I can. I want to breed them. And he said, well, you're okay with what you have, but don't sell it yet, and we'll get back with you. And it's like 2 years go by, and they didn't rule on it. So I gave them all to Louis. I didn't sell them to him. I just gave them to Louis. And they wound up with, there was a garter snake expert in England at that time and wrote the only book on garter snakes at that time. And he got them. So anyway, all the ones in ham that you can get, the Tetratania, San Francisco garter snakes, came from those snakes that went to England and then eventually made it to ham. And as you know, especially where you live, they're beautiful snakes, but they're not the prettiest garter snake. Some of the red-sided and Oregons and, some of the orange, pumpkin orange and black things up there, you live in garter snake heaven.
I've got some awfully pretty garters, but it's a tough fight for me. Just the face in general, like, it's one of my favorite head structures of a snake. Yeah, you get a good green head on it, it's fine. But man, when a San Francisco garter has that, just the darker red head, like the stripe and everything, it's a beautiful body snake, but the face on that thing, man, that's a tough fight for me. That is a gorgeous snake.
Yeah, I agree with you. They really are special. And saying that, and people do, you could have collections of garter snakes. They're just such high metabolic shitters. It's I like it when I tell people that love indigos, I go, of all the snakes in the world that don't belong in a box, they're cage destroyers, they're high metabolic eaters and shitters, and I used to catch them in South Florida. The most painful non-venomous bite I ever had was a 7-foot indigo. I pulled out of the side of a canal, and it turned around and clamped on my forearm and wouldn't let go. It peeled the labials over its eyes like a king snake chewing on you. Jeez. And my arm was limp. And so people say, well, they don't bite. And I go, yeah, well, they can.
Is that's insinuating that there's a venomous bite?
Yeah, well, I'm not proud of that. And with all the controversy today and stuff, I'll put it out there. I did Venomous for 50 years. So 1 bite a decade. you say, well, you work with them every day. But anytime you're bit by a venomous snake with a captive venomous snake, it's your fault. It's absolutely your fault. You broke the rules and you got bit, period. Subject closed. And it's not pretty. It's expensive and can be life-threatening. I had one really serious bite, really bad one, and it was a pygmy rattlesnake.
Really?
So when people tell me, and I have a medical background, they say, well, oh, well, it's not that bad, or it's just a pygmy. Look, any foreign protein introduced into your body is like bees kill some people. So you don't know, the nuances, the particular part of the biochemistry. Everything's going to happen to you when you're bitten by a snake. The same snake can bite one guy, and it's not that bad. He's got some swelling up to his arm, and it can bite somebody else and kill him. So all the free handling and all the stuff that's going on, everything else is it's really too bad. And I don't like to talk about it because it's a badge that I have to pin on and says, I'm a dumbass, and you are if you're bit, and it can be dangerous. But it comes, if you do it long enough, you're probably going to get bit. And I was fortunate. That bite was bad though. I had platelet degradation, peed blood, was in ICU for 3 days, and
man, I wasn't pygmy so bad, but my wife is drawing the line at Venomous again. So.
Well, yeah, and look, and I did it all. I had king cobras, forest cobras. I had all that kind of stuff. But I look back at this age in retrospect, and I say, there's certain things that we probably just shouldn't have in collections. And for the Mamba crowd, anybody that keeps a black or a Jameson's, is crazy. They're crazy snakes, and
scary animals.
And look, there's legitimate concerns. I mean, I was always permitted, and I had locks on everything, locked rooms and all that stuff. But think about it. If I'm a neighbor and I've got 2 kids, and the guy next door with the long braids got a pair of king cobras, I'm concerned, and probably should be. So that's another thing too with collections. Some people that, when you pull your 14-foot retic out your front yard, because it's your yard and you can do what you want, you're just inviting all kinds of problems. And don't do that.
I had an uncle that ended up on the news for that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of this. My little brother happens to be in the chat right now, and he was talking about the garters, saying they look fucking cool, but they stink. And I absolutely agree. And I'm thinking about, you've kept, basically everything. What's the worst thing that's ever musked you?
Well, I will have to. Well, king snake, garter snakes, probably, if you really get down to it. I mean, king snakes and garter snakes can be pretty nasty, but I will tell you this. The beautiful indigos and the great indigos, and they're great, wonderful snakes. I have a picture in my book of us holding 4. We picked up off an old cedar wood pile. There was a population in Fagahatchee Strand that my friend's parents owned the property, and just gorgeous, huge snakes. And I've kept them and I've bred them, but cage destroyers. And sometimes you want to get really musked. Indigos can be difficult feeders. And I remember getting like 24 little chicks, you get them, you pick them up and they're all peeping. I'm looking at them in the car. I'm going, oh shit, God, they're the cutest damn things. But the indigos got to dump them all in there. Indigo ate everyone, wouldn't eat mice or rats. I had a 2-gallon liquid chick shit in 2 days in my wooden cages, smeared from one end to the other. And, with hide boxes turned over, heavy water bowls dumped upside down. And I came to a conclusion early on. I go, this is one snake. It doesn't belong in a box, any size box. I love them. I love them. They're just wonderful snakes. Cribos, all of them. And Michaels keeps and breeds a lot of them. There's a bunch of guys, but not for me. And I've had garter snakes before, but they're high metabolic, and you pick them up, and I've got one pair of Yuma Kings from the reservation, Indian reservation. They're really rare. They're kind of different, but I can't pick them up without getting king snake musk. That 3 days later you go, "What's that smell, man?"
Yeah.
I stopped keeping.
And now, Pituophis on that subject.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, you can walk in a house, and I have a locked room and locked cages, and I can walk in the front door and go, "The Kentucky pine shit."
Yeah.
And it's like a snow shovel.
Yeah. Oh no, I've got multiple different groups of JNI. I've got black pines. I've got Florida pines. I got leucistic Florida pines. I've got northern pines. And yeah, a couple of days after feeding day, and I do chicks a lot. I'll do like varied diets on mine, and just my whole family knows. Like Lily will come in the house and she'll be like, "Daddy, I think Tank made poo poo," and I'm like,
it takes a special family, doesn't it?
Tank
when
poo-poo.
you really break it down and talk about it. Come on, guys, and you say you got a family that has to live with that smell, and you get shipments of mice, and you things are thawed out, and somebody gives you back that wonderful mouse while you're gone for 2 days, and you come back in, and it takes a special family and special people to even understand that. But
my wife's broke her nose from a fight years ago when we were young rowdy kids, and she can't smell anything. And it's the best. But my daughter,
you're lucky.
My daughter knows every smell. She knows every snake. She knows when a snake didn't eat. She knows when a snake maybe puked up or a baby didn't hold something down, and or when Tank poo poos.
For the kids that grow up with that, it's like that's just normal for them.
Yeah.
Until their friends come over and they go, "What?"
Yeah.
Well, Craig, I do have to derail what we're talking about a little bit, because I would love to get a little bit out of you about the red zeppelins and where you come into that project, and maybe a little bit of the history on it.
Well, I can't take credit for that. I at the very beginning, I know of a few people that have unbroken lineage to Okatee and have just bred kind of the same animals. Howie Sherman's one.
Yeah.
And of course they've been line bred, and they get better and better and better. But it's an unbroken lineage. And he called and was all excited, and he a pair of older breeders that are produced every year, all normals. He got a spontaneous albino, and it does happen on occasions. And that was the start of the red Zepp thing. And of course, he's obnoxious with the names. He gave us a group of names to pick, and Red Zeppelin, and I liked Red Zepp and stuff. But I got him early on from him in some of the litter mates and stuff, and produced them very early. And they're fascinating. It's a fascinating albino because they're extremely variable.
Yeah.
Some of the best ones I've had, and I sent you a couple of pictures, they're probably the prettiest corn snakes I've ever seen.
They're beautiful, yeah.
They're just gorgeous snakes. But, mine were always born very small. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of lipstick red and snow white.
Yeah.
And I gave those back to Howie, by the way.
What I mean, and just looking at this, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but goddamn, what a snake, right?
Yeah, I mean, golly, I really crazy. And all I had to do is display that snake, when I went to a show, and everything was gone. I mean, but they're variable. Some of them had orange in them. All of them were pretty, but variable. And golly, they're the dinkiest little things. Mine all were very small, and took a while to catch up. That was my favorite. Now that was red on red. That was the ugliest of all the red Zeps. I hate to tell the story because it's my grandson. But one of my grandsons said, "Well, I want one of those albino corn snakes." And I said, "Well, you can have this red Zep," because it was the only one that it looked terrible, And I had it feeding. And a year and a half later, I didn't pay much attention to it. He brought it back and said, well, I'm not going to keep snakes anymore. I'll give it back to you. I looked at that snake and I went, what? I mean, golly, did I miss the boat on that one?
It's a beautiful snake.
That was my favorite because that was just red on red.
It's so cool.
Whites. Yeah, beautiful, just gorgeous, beautiful
That's a gorgeous
snakes.
animal.
And but they are born small, and it takes a while, to get them going. But I still think it's just one of the most incredible albinos out there, and it came from a spontaneous animal. Of course, people doubt that, and they always doubt different stories and things. That was a different kind of a zep too. Actually, she was a big snake. That was a pretty big snake. But I know Howie, and he was excited, and it is what it is. He had a spontaneous albino, and there you go. So
Yeah.
it's back in the day of parthenogenesis. I mean, people didn't believe that kind of stuff and everything, and that actually happened to me once. I just walked in, had a single animal, and I had two, and I went, "What happened here?" I raised a snake. So, unusual, but wow, what an albino. So those snakes were kind of the khaki corns. They were coming to James Island, and Ricky Walters started catching them, and he, sent me a picture, and I said, I want to go out there. And we didn't find any, but he had caught a pair and gave them to me, and I love those snakes. I bred them for a while. Of course, like I say, I line bred them. I got the bigger blotch on them, and but I like that contrast, in those things.
That's a good. I got a picture of one that I got from Tony Dungara that I shared with Justin.
Yeah, Tony did a lot with kind of the same lines and the same stuff.
Kind of went for the buckskin Okatee kind of group.
Right. Yeah, the buckskin. The original thing was khaki, and then kind of the buckskin thing. But I like that contrast.
That girl right there.
I like that khaki tan with the orange, blotch, and kind of an alterno looking thing, but really cool in the corn snake. But here again, the variability of corn snakes, background colors and blotching is so variable. You could have hundreds of corn snakes that are different.
Justin, pull that picture back up again. I'm gonna, because this is a corn snake podcast, we have a lot of corn snake listeners that watch this. So this snake is from Tony Dungara. It's a buckskin Okatee. And she's probably, I don't know if she is gravid, but I've got a couple visual locks with her to her male. I had somebody reach out to me on this snake and tell me how she looked malnourished, because if you look down her back, and I responded back, I was like, if you cut a corn snake in half, it should look like a loaf of bread. And I was like,
that's a subject that
yeah.
Look, I never confuse wild snakes with captive snakes.
Sure, yeah.
You're breeding snakes, and to have vitellogenesis, to have ovulation, females need fat stores to produce. And when you breed them every year, there are snakes that my agamas, when they're feeding in there, and I'm walking by and I can feed them every day for like 2 weeks, like, a big fuzzy. They take them, they convert them, and they eat them, and they're in a big enough tank that they're not obese.
No,
but they produce, and I get clutches of 8 eggs. I mean, I didn't want to, but double clutched a gama, for a couple of years, and I don't like to see hugely obese snakes. None of us do, and stuff. But I would rather see. And here again, don't confuse captive snakes and wild snakes, because people say you own collections and you see snakes that are kind of thin, and they go, well, that's what they are in the wild. And I go, well, they're not in the wild.
Yeah,
you're confusing two. You cannot control your snake in a cage in thermal regulation and hunting and like wild snakes. You just can't do it. And it's okay to have a snake that's well nourished. Now, I'm not talking about huge obese snakes, but to have, and I'd rather see a well-nourished snake than I would quote the explanation. Well, it looks like a wild weight. That snake looks extremely healthy to me.
Yeah. Oh, she's perfect. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. So, and that's a big thing that we do. We do confuse wild snakes and captive snakes, and they're not the same. I'll argue that all day long. They live in different conditions. They're raised in different conditions. And so,
Chris, if that snake's obese, then the one I found is on its deathbed because.
Oh no, I was told my snake was malnourished, that it was too thin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was told that if you could see that divot in its back, that it's just too thin.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. So Craig, you hit a trigger word for me. I'd love to just hear a little bit about the Agalma. It's a species that not a lot of people keep or breed, and I know that you've had success with them.
Well, okay. So here's the thing about Agalma. I won't go into names because they're all friends, and a couple have probably made mistakes and things. Agalmas, people are going down there and collecting them. They're found in two areas. The Baja Mountain king snake, and they're found in the Juarez Mountains and the Martyrs, and they're in close proximity. And the real prize, quote unquote, are the Martyrs. Although I can produce animals from, either mountain range, and you can't tell the difference between them. So it's kind of a crapshoot. But and so everybody wants Martyrs, and people market some of these as Martyrs. The only person I know that has true Martyrs now, I think Bob Hansen had, Martyrs and still produces them, and I have some, I think, but the only legitimate line to Martyrs is Chris Rodriguez from the LA Zoo, who went down there in the Martyrs under permit. One of the best collectors in the world, spent 2 weeks there and got 2.2 and brought him back, and he's producing them. And I don't think he's even selling them yet, but I'm not really interested in the rest of the Zonata. I like them. But I love Agalmas, and I find them easy to breed. You have to get them cold.
Yeah.
And a mistake that young breeders have about snakes is we fall into this cline of 55 degrees for 3 months. And, we have these parameters that people fall into and what they do and copy. And, look at your snakes and see what they're doing. And you can learn a lot from what the snakes are telling you. I put my Agalmas on the back porch, and as long as it doesn't hit 32, now if you have a warm spell, they go back in the snake room, which is cooled down. But I put them out there. They've gotten down to 39, 40, 42 degrees. I've opened up the top, and one of them will be out crawling around in its container.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've never lost a snake, by that. If your snake has an empty gut, let me clarify this, has an empty gut, which is very important before you put it down, and also has sufficient fat stores, and has a means for hydration, which is important, and it's not tropical, the species. Snakes can tolerate low temperatures. And I get breeding out of snakes that, from snakes that other people don't breed because they're afraid. And I understand that. They just don't want to lose their snake. And by the information they're getting, people don't do this and don't do that. Now, I don't like artificial coolers. Some people have luck with them, and some of the old, we used to use old refrigerators and all kinds of things and stuff. I don't do that. And as far as temperature ranges, the older I've gotten, I have more of a variance in that. I incubate my eggs. I just put them up on top of in the containers I use across the top of my largest cage, and it's got a light hood, and it's got a wood platform where I can put the eggs, and they'll get up to and I do this with everything I have. They'll get up to 82, 84, on a rare occasion 86, and then at nighttime they'll drop down into the 70s, and they come back up. You can err on the side, well, within certain parameters, on lower temperatures, if you're incubating at 78, 77, it's just going to take longer.
Sure.
Where you get into trouble is higher temperatures.
Yeah.
High temperatures, and a lot of people do that, and people look for this consistent temperature, this the 84, 86, 82 thing. I don't worry about that anymore. And last year, probably the first year ever, I didn't have one bad egg, and I had everything hatch, and I hatched quite a few things. And when you put your snakes down, they should have an empty gut. They should be well nourished, and I see a lot of snakes that females that don't have enough fat stores. And you look in the wild, they may not breed for a year or two, or they may have 2 eggs or 4 eggs or something. And we have some of these very large clutches and things, but you don't confuse wild with what we're doing.
It's artificial,
yeah. Feed your snakes, and your females should have those fat stores, because that's ovulation and villogenesis. All that is dependent on having enough fat to produce good embryos. So yeah, I've gotten kind of less strict with some parameters. I mean, some things I'm very strict at, and I talk a lot in the Pituophis book about snake people becoming veterinarians. Look, I had a medical career, so there's nothing worse than putting a vial and a syringe in a snake guy's hands.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he feels this rush. It's like, oh, I'm going to medicate my own snakes, and you find some people way over medicating snakes. Some people can't do medication math. Some drugs are designed for warm-blooded animals, not cold-blooded animals. There's a whole array of problems that you can see out there. Some people I call the flagell freaks. Just give a little dab of flagell. Well, how much? Well, it doesn't matter. Just put a little bit on a mouse. That's all they do. Well, look, I've had a career in this stuff. Dosages matter. Over time, there are side effects to antifungals and things. So I'm very conservative on treating snakes, and egg-bound snakes, for instance.
Yeah.
We freak out, and we're going to go get that 18 gauge needle, and many people start clipping the renal vein because they go too far to the side on the egg. And I give that snake plenty of time. I've actually put a snake down over time, and in the spring it passed the two eggs. And sometimes you'll breed a snake and you'll get a clutch eggs, and then you get the first egg out is this really weird bad egg. Well, that was from last year. It just sat up there in the oviduct all year and then got pushed out. Squeezing eggs out, and then you have ruptures, and I'm very conservative on that, and I've done a lot of snake medicine in my lifetime. I've perfected a few ways to feed snakes that I'm pretty proud of. If you guys know Dick Ross, who he was, he wrote the Python breeding manual. He was an MD. He just died recently, but we used to talk a lot. And he was medical too. But for snakes that won't feed, I take a syringe and I take a piece of IV cannula. So it lure locks on the syringe, and I cut the tube to about 6 inches. And I get beef baby food, heavy cream. You're going to laugh at this, but I can explain all this, and it works. Heavy cream and water, and I mix it to where you can pull it up in the syringe. And then I lubricate just with water. You have to be careful you don't put that tube down the trach and inject into the lung, but it's pretty easy. You just put it down, and about a half a cc. So you can visualize on that syringe, that usually a 3 cc syringe, what a pinky would look like in there. and basically you push that in, withdraw it, and what you're doing is buying time until that snake starts feeding on itself.
Mm-hmm.
It works. I've never lost a snake doing that. I've had great success on snakes that other people have that won't feed. And what happens is the beef baby food is high in protein. It's digestible. The heavy cream comes in because it's kind of thick, but it's very heavy in calcium. So you're not putting bone in there like in a pink and
Right.
in a mouse. So it gives you some calcium coverage, and it works. I can go into detail if you guys ever get interested. In fact, I put a picture of it, I think, in the new book to do it, and it works. It works very well.
Jack Vicente does something similar with the corals.
Pardon me?
So Jack Vicente does something similar with the corals.
Yeah. The old grade tube feeder, was my old buddy Bill Haast, who was a mentor years ago and stuff. And of course, he had a big caulking gun, and he did all his venom extractions. That's how he fed all of his king cobras and everything. It was a huge caulking gun, and shoved that thing down, and just basically a pulverized rat or whatever, his little mixture of stuff. But this works. It works really well, and it's if you have multiple little snakes, you can do it very quickly. I also, when I probe snakes, I don't use any kind of gels. I just use water. Water lubricates just as well.
What about mouse tails, like assist feeding mouse tails? I've done that with some.
Oh yeah, mouse tails are great.
Too.
What's better than mouse tails, especially things like corns and stuff, if you can get very small rats, a little bit bigger than rat fuzzies, there's a little more viscera, in that tail, and it has some calcium because they're forming bone in there. It's cartilaginous, but it's bone and calcium. And I find that those rat tails are a little bit more nourishing. Mouse tails can be a little bony, and very, very unviscera-like. It's not true viscera, but what you're getting in there is more, tissue.
Yeah. That's kind of been the like, I'll do mouse tails if I have to, just to get something in them until they decide to start taking off. But I've tried some rat tails too, like older rats.
I wet them.
The hairs on the rat tails can be real pain in the ass to.
Well, the little small ones, it's real fuzzy.
Yeah.
And when I put that down, I mean, you can use egg albumin, which is slippery and digestible. I just use water, but I twist it. So when I start it down, I twist it and twist it and twist it and twist it, and then put the snake down and don't move. Just don't move. And that snake you'll spend 2 minutes and you're sitting there going, come on, man. And once it starts to crawl forward, it'll pull the rest of that tail down. If you can get a snake to crawl forward after you force fed it, it's going to S-curve that meal down. When they start backtracking, it's coming back. So, I have a whole process, for non-feeders, and I don't sell anything to anybody that's not feeding. But I'll get it feeding. Sometimes people are just in too much of a hurry. I mean, I've got one of these unicolor corn snakes that was just, all it would do is eat, boiled pinks, and it's like a year old. Well, I threw a rat pink in the other day, and it just mowed it, So, same thing with rosy bows. Very interesting. Some baby rosy bows will not eat. And if you throw a rat pink in, and you look at the rat pink, you look at the baby rosy bow, and you go, there's no way it's going to eat that thing. And if it does, it's coming back. But no kidding. I've got two in there that just jump. It's like a totally different animal, and they eat it and meld it down. And 60 years of tricks. My problem is remembering them all, but there's a lot of tricks, but
it's kind of funny that with some species, even looking at the tricks, with me, with Alterna and John Lassiter, who's in the chat, one thing he kind of always told me about Alterna was never, ever, ever try to force them to eat. Just put them into brumation. If they don't eat,
Well, there's a misconception here. Who told you that?
John Lasseter. He's kind of been my
I know
close
John.
friend of mine. Oh yeah, yeah.
John's
I know
a
you know
great
John.
guy. John's a great guy. John's a great
Yeah.
guy, and he's not wrong.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: it's like some baby agama. I gave Howie a pair, and I sold one guy a pair of babies that weren't feeding yet, and a lot of them don't feed at first, but I get them all feeding for like half the price. And I told him exactly what to do. I said, don't put them down though. When you start putting small snakes down over time that haven't fed, you're going to lose a number of snakes. I don't do that. I keep them up, and it does work. You put a non-feeder down, you bring them up in the spring, and they feed, and that's true for Alterna too. My thing with Alterna from the very get-go, and I bred some of the first ones and stuff, I would take all the babies that didn't feed, and I would go right out into my front yard in Lakeland or down south, and I'd catch baby Segrii, baby anoles. And at nighttime, if you go out there, they're on all the ferns vertical, and they're just holding on, and they're really, you just pluck them off with the light. Put the 5 or 6 Alterna in an aquarium, take a handful of those little baby anoles, and you just throw them in there. And what it is the movement, because as soon as they hit, things are running, and you will watch 4 out of the 5 non-feeders go crazy that movement, and they've got something. So, and then, the parasite people say, well, you're going to parasitize a snake. And I said, well, I can tell you a lot about parasitology. So 99 out of 100 are not going to die from eating that anole. So, there are certain things, though. Oak toads and baby hognose snakes transfer a ton of flatworms. So if you have a snake that forms little tiny bumps on the back, they look like blisters, but they're not from water blisters. Express that little bump, push it out, and a lot of times you'll see this little flatworm. It's not a tapeworm; it's a flatworm, different.
Interesting.
And there's a little flatworm crawling around. You go, golly, you got to kid me, especially the hognose snakes. So I bred a lot of baby hognose snakes. The non-feeders, I started going out and collecting baby oak toads because they were small, and threw them in there, and found that out. I found out buying commercial minnows when I was raising garter snakes are just heavily parasitized.
Yeah.
That transfer into your garter snakes. So you need to freeze minnows or just go catch wild dace or wild minnows. But all those fishing houses that sell bait, those minnows are just packed with parasites. Of course, it doesn't matter. They're fishing bait, but so. You learn the hard way from a lot of this stuff.
On the hognose thing, I bred Mexican hognose last year. I have one
of my favorite snakes, and I can talk years on those things.
I have a pair of wild caught Boy Scout Road Mexican hognose. They are cool, and they're tiny. They are tiny, but they were not terribly hard to get feeding on frozen thawed pinks. They were. I never had much problem with. They take scenting.
Generally, I usually do pretty well.
But I was shocked at how big of a meal those little tiny 3-inch long babies will take a pinky, no problem.
Oh yeah.
Same with those house snakes I got from Dustin, dude. Those things, he's like, dude, they can. You'd be amazed at what those things can take down, and it is incredible.
House snakes are pythons. You can't tell me otherwise.
I agree.
Well, in the wild, things are opportunists. They eat what they eat.
Sure.
I've got a picture somewhere of a baby emerald tree boa that ate a tree possum, a baby tree possum. It's the biggest meal in a small snake you've ever seen. And the person that kept going back, taking a picture, the thing digested it because they can thermoregulate the way they need to. They can get cool, they can get warm. I found lepidus on rock cuts, with huge scoloporus, poinsettii, melting those things down. And you'd say, how in the world is that thing not going to toss that back up? But we do it in captivity, and of course it comes right back to us. So something really big most of the time, depending on species. But Yeah, all that's learning. And I'll reveal this because it's a 30-mile road and it's already in one of my books. But 2810, the Pinto Canyon Road, got to read that chapter in my book about Kennerlei.
Pinto's cool.
Mexican Hognose. That was one of the most wonderful roads in my life. Lynn and I saw so many cool things down there. A very special road. And another story about Kennerlei is when I lived in Marathon, Linda had gone over to Santa. She came back in, and at the 318 junction of 90, which is a mile out of town, she said, there's 2 baby Mexican hognose snakes dead in the road. And in the afternoon, it looks like they were just killed. And I go, that's crazy. And I went out there, I found them. I went out the next day and I found 2 live ones. This is 5:30 and it's probably 92 degrees and the asphalt is like sticky.
Yeah.
Right. So for a week, these things were hatching. I was finding them moving at that time of the day. Didn't find them in the morning out there. Didn't find them in the evening. You rarely find Kennerlei at night. And there's something to that. They were crawling in late afternoon. I filled the bottom of a bucket, and I have a picture of it because I wanted to raise a pair from around Marathon. And I plucked out my best pair and took them back out there and walked down there's a ditch down there. Actually, I went around the ditch trying to feel to see maybe what they're eating, what was in there, and stuff. Kennerlei are really different.
They're cool.
Really like them. They're great snakes. And Zach Lohman is writing the Hognose snake book.
Dr. Zach, we're good friends with him.
Yeah. I did a talk with Zach or for Zach, I think, and I saw him at HIS. Yeah, he's a great guy. Yeah, he's got his zoo staff coining my Planet Snake Tune thing. They were using it down there. So
good. I keep a handful of westerns. My daughter loves Western Hognose, especially the Morphs. So we have quite a few of them, and they are so different from the Mexican hogs. They're
very different. It's a very
totally different animals.
Very different snake, and I really love them. They're really cool snakes.
And they're half the size. They're tiny.
Yeah. Now some of the Kennerlei that you'll find down in South Texas are a little bit bigger, but the ones up around the Big Bend area are not that big. Yeah.
Those Boy Scout roads I have, I think my male. So Austin Bohannon, who's the he was on one of our podcasts, the King Snake Chronicles, which is another show we do. He is the Alpine.
He sent me a couple of pics for the Pituophis book, I think.
Yeah, I think so. He's one of the biologists in Alpine, Texas. He found the female that I have on his wedding night, and his son's name is Davis from the Davis Mountains. And I have that girl now, and dude, she's maybe 16 inches and like 8 years old. The male is maybe 9 inches, and he's the same age. Found within the same time frame. They're just tiny, and when they hatch, they hatch out.
They're little.
I have a picture of one in the palm of my hand, and it couldn't be smaller.
Yeah. Boy Scout Road. I write a lot about it. I went out there.
Boy Scout Road.
Went out there in the early 70s, and nobody was hunting that road. And I met the McBees that ran the Boy Scout camp out there.
Okay.
And I was a Boy Scout, and they asked me and invited me to come do a talk on reptile merit badge and reptiles and stuff. And I had lunch with them up in that old A-frame, and they gave me carte blanche permission to go back into Goat Cave Canyon back there. And most people don't know, Boy Scout Road is where the holotype alterna by Brown and Meyenberg was caught and described, and the holotype subocularis.
Really?
Yep,
at the end of Boy Scout Road.
Wow.
10 miles down, another mile back into that canyon. And Meyenberg, Brown did the collecting, I think, or I might have reversed in Meyenberg. It was 1901. and they caught the first Alterna and described it. And of course, that was the Davis Mountain king snake. At that time, not known to be part of Blair's king snakes. And yeah, so it's an iconic road, if for no other reason than that. And it was one of the first places, outside of River Road where Subocularis, was known. And I started collecting Wild Rose Pass. I named them Wild Rose Pass because Wild Rose Pass is a patch of wild roses. They're little tiny rose, Texas rose, up at the cut in the top going down to Boy Scout Road, and caught some really chocolate white spotted subocs, and I've bred those for years. Beautiful snakes.
They're great. They're great right there.
I've bred a lot of transfixed rat snakes. I produced the first snow back when Dusty was young, and he mentioned somebody will produce the Holy Grail, so I already produced it. It's on the back of his book, late. They changed that thing. Dusty came out and lived in my little guest house for a couple months. I had to kick him out. Finally, I thought he was going to live there for like ever. I went down, went through some tough times, went through a divorce, and I got to know him really well. And I encouraged him, a very bright guy, and I encouraged him to go back to school, which he did, and got his master's, and of course wrote the complete Subocularis. And Dusty's a good guy. He's a smart guy. A lot of stuff on horn lizards now.
Yeah. That stretch of Highway 17 going between Wild Rose Pass and all the way up to Boy Scout Road and into Boy Scout Road means a lot to me. That's where I found my Alterna. So that's a very hard find.
Yeah, I bought one of the only Glass Mountain Alternas.
Nice.
Verifiable. And since that time, there's a rancher out there that I know. He's into snakes, a very close friend. And he found a canyon on the property that he manages in the middle of the Glass, this is on the western side, very important. And he's managed to find a pair. Nice. They're remarkable looking, and I'm waiting for those to breed. There's very few things I want, but I want a pair of those. And, but yeah, it's a fascinating area. It's a great place out there, and everything out there is all those sky islands. They're like insular snakes, like island snakes, because they're separated by the desert, and all the emery can be different from one place to another, and the old Inner Montana, we were talking about corn snakes. Mm-hmm. I went into, I think it was Ron Cobble's East Bay Vivarium years ago in the 70s, and saw my first, quote, Inner Montana. And what I saw back then were kind of maroon and silver looking things. They were really incredible looking snakes. Very corn snake looking, but very, 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 of course, taxonomies, were all over the place, not just with Pituophis, but we need to do some more work. We can't even really definitively define species yet. Yeah. The very basic root and phylogenetics, you can't deny DNA. It's a very important tool. It's the tool, but when you just use selected criteria to prove a point, just one point, and you ignore morphology and zoogeography, I don't think you've done your job. Yeah. And I point out in the Pituophis book, I can show you the skull of a gopher snake and the skull of a bull snake. And there's a great Dixon's book. There's a great graph in there done by Regina Lavoie. And I actually cut roadkill heads off of bull snakes and gopher snakes, and could see this clearly myself. The butt joint and the rostral plate and everything are completely different. Wow. So in the dictionary, different is defined as different. So if you're calling something the same thing and you have morphological differences, I will stand my ground and say that it's different. And sometimes subspecies works really well. I'm not a big fan of putting horridus, timber rattlesnakes, canebrakes in the same group, because I can show you a North Florida canebrake and a New York timber, and I can show a huge morphological difference in the head. And I'm not talking about just color and pattern. I'm talking about structure. And subspecies worked really well. But, you know, with all due respect to grad students, they need to do papers on something else. Look, the eastern rat snake, what's happened now with the eastern rat snake thing is there's no real field utility with this thing now. When somebody says, yeah, I have an eastern rat snake, the first thing you say is like, oh, where's it from? What color is it? What, you know, if back in the day, if you say, well, I have a black rat snake, we say, oh, okay. And I kind of know that. If I knew nothing about snakes and somebody said I have a yellow rat snake, you'd assume it's yellow. Now we have everything's eastern rat snake, and it's based on DNA, and I've read the DNA and stuff, and but there's selected points. It's not the whole picture. So you know, I'm one of those that I think it's okay to speak up and not agree with every change. You know, they want to take Ruthveni, Louisiana pine snake, and put it in the old cotinifer chain. In other words, make a gopher snake out of it, and based on some DNA, and you know, I'll go kicking and screaming. It's not. And you know, and sometimes if you've looked at snakes 50 and 60 years, and people say, well, it's a subjective thing. I'm not so sure. When you look at something long enough every day, crotalids, rattlesnakes through glasses, you start to see changes. You start looking at scales around eyes. You start looking at changes, and you say these things are different. And when subspecies worked well, sometimes it doesn't work well. And I agree, it should just be species. But when it works well, and some 24-year-old comes along and changes everything, well, based on what? Where's the 14 guys, the 14 Harry Greens that should approve this or not approve it? I mean, I'm not buying into everything until I read it and I'm convinced, and I'm really nobody. So, but I think it's okay to have your opinion as long as you read and do that. You can't. I said in the book, you can't make you know, a swan out of a duck. If it's a duck, it's a duck. A swan, it's a swan. And when you have one idea and you look at the DNA that covers one specific area and you go, oh, it's the same. Well, we haven't looked at the whole thing. And phylogenetics is a new study. You know, there's more and more and new, and eventually they're going to get this thing perfect, and we'll have good taxonomy. You know, but we don't now. It's all over the place.
No, and the fact that taxonomy can be defined by individuals over time and consistently changed is,
well, yeah. My book will be outdated 2 years. You know.
Yeah.
And in my book, I actually took a step back in time. I went back to where we all agreed, and I mentioned subspecies that are no longer recognized, because if I don't, people that are new that come into the book and stuff will never know what a San Martin gopher snake is.
Yeah.
Or, you know, because it's all lumped into one. And I think that's important to know that, the difference in insular. And I don't claim that it's that. I let the reader make his own mind up. I just produce some of the evidence and talk about that. But yeah, taxonomy is in flux right now in so many things.
Yeah. You know, I have a pair of on the Pituophis run, I have a pair of pulmillus, and I think at one point they were trying to push them into anectins. I think it was.
Well, no, it's they are. You know, it's a dwarf snake.
Yeah, it's a tiny
well, it's
thing.
Very spastic to handle, by the way.
Yeah, they're garter snakes, right?
Yeah. So I like the subspecific classification, and you know, and the zoogeography shows separation. It's on an island. I respect that. But yeah, I mean, it's down to recognizing only 5 or 6 species of Pituophis.
No.
And I've got 19 in there, and I'm not saying, I make it very clear that some of these are not recognized today as this and that, but I took a step back where you could see everything as it was.
Yeah.
And I think that was important to do. So,
Well, Craig, I got to ask a question. The book's not out. So me and Dr.
well,
Laughlin,
we're hoping, and without getting into politics again, and you may start to guess where I am on a lot of this stuff, with the tariff thing. Eco publishes in China. The best publishing houses, fact, are in China. The best paper, the cost of doing business over there, the labor is a lot cheaper, and you can get a better quality product for the price. Published books today are dying. I mean, obviously, you can put something on, on these things and read these things, and if $50 for a book is a lot of money. So nobody's doing it. And, Bob has produced things he's lost money. So has Russ Gurley, out of being important to do so. And he's committed to do this. But now with the tariff thing, everybody's publishing has stopped because it's right on the fringe of not being able to sell anything anyway because of the pricing. And now you're going to tariff something and at $50 maybe, at $75 no, sort of thing. So, but Bob's committed to this, and we're going to get it done. He wants to have it out by Tinley in October.
Oh, awesome!
He's going to do leather bound, hard bound, and soft cover.
Well, I have a question on that book, and I don't if it's a spoiler. Excuse me, if it's a spoiler or something that you don't want to release. In your opinion, do the Kentucky pines sit as a unique species, or do they still lump into northern pines?
I think they're northern pines.
Okay.
They're unique for sure, but they're definitely pine snakes.
Okay.
I mean, I don't see any morphological difference if you take an Ocean City pine and a Kentucky pine and you strip the color, and everything out of them, you're looking at the same snake. I don't see any structural thing or anything. It's interesting though, because that same tier of northern pines, that yellow, is found in Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Very rare, Tennessee, and a little less rare in Alabama, but not easy finds.
Well, they're quite cut off from the rest of their northern.
They really are. They're distinct, and then that's where zoogeography comes in. You can make case and points for subspecies, but I'm not the guy. I'm not an academic. We need to have some better definitions of how we define things in species and stuff. So, certainly I get it's not on color and pattern alone.
Sure.
There's pattern class, color class, and stuff, but it's really in flux now. It's really a mess.
It makes my heart happy that you mentioned Horridus and Etricodatus.
So Pumulus is interesting because I had a long debate on the spelling with Bob Hansen, and the spelling today is US at the end instead of IS. But when Klauber did his original descriptions and stuff, somebody said it was IS, and that's how he had it. Although the Greek and Latin is US at the end. So I went with US. I bowed to Bob's new book. Do you want to be different? And in that name, it's not very important. It's one of those little. When you look at your own writing for 3 years, you got to get out of there. You got to go home. You got to leave it. It's hard writing a book for me. So interesting. You have that pair though.
Yeah.
Are you breeding them?
What's that? The Pumulus?
Are you breeding them?
I'm probably a year out from breeding the Pumulus.
Well, if I'm still alive and you breed them, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be your first customer on those two.
If I have success,
there's a number of people breeding them, but and I've had them before, but I would like those. So
I've gotten very lucky with Pituophis in my collection. In fact, going back on the Pituophis thing and Parthenogenesis, I had my pair of black pines. Jerry Salmon, who I know you know very well.
Jerry helped with the book. His name's on the front, little smaller letters, and
he's who I got my black pines from.
Well, Jerry knows as much about black pines as anybody.
Yes,
And,
yes, he does.
Those are good black pines. My black pines too are from the Mobile area, and they're with Travis, who lives out in West Texas. I gave him my black pines, but
Nice.
marvelous snakes. They're great snakes.
Well, I had an interesting thing happen a couple years ago. So I bred my black pines, and then my female, she didn't recover well from. I mean, they're giant eggs. They're just giant.
Well, they're
eggs.
very elongated. A lot of them.
They're so long, and they're huge babies, which is awesome.
Sure.
And so I bred them, and then so the next year I was like, all right, I'm going to give my female the year off. I'm going to feed her really heavy, and so I fed her through winter. I didn't brumate them, and then she still produced a clutch of eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And Craig, I wish I would have sent pictures of these eggs. They were red almost. They had red veins all over the outside. They were the ugliest eggs I've ever seen in my life. And so me, as the nerd that I am, I was like, well, we still incubate them, right? Mm-hmm. And out of the 4 eggs, I got 2 good babies that happened to just hatch as a pair from these. I mean, we called them zombie snakes because these eggs should have never made it. And she still produced these eggs, and now probably retained sperm, right? Like we're talking about a year later.
Yeah, sure.
But the weird thing that happened was she was back up to size. She only laid 4 eggs, which was really weird. She lost no weight. I hatched 2 a pair. I actually gave them to a good buddy of mine, and then I brumate her the next year. She does not produce eggs the next year, and then now I've got her and the boy together, and they won't stop breeding. So it was really weird. They wouldn't breed the year after. Just I still find
I never change. I just go. I do the same thing every year. I just make sure they feed well. If they breed, they breed. They don't, they don't. Yeah. And with Pituophis and the Kentucky pines, I put them together very early because a lot of people miss breeding with
it's
Pituophis.
The first thing you put together is your Pituophis.
I put them together very early, and then even if I don't get breeding, I leave them together. And you know, it's you have to separate the feed and everything, but I do that and had really good luck that way. My biggest Pituophis eggs were Florida pines.
Oh man, yeah.
There's a picture in the book of me holding 2 7.5 footers that I raised, you know, there's big controversy. People say Ruthven-eye eggs are the biggest, and some say black pines and are big, but some just enormous Florida pine eggs. But I've got some good people that have contributed on black pines. I think one of those lost his job in the recent thing, but yeah, I think the format will be something that you'll appreciate. At the end of each species account, I have field notes by a guest.
Yeah.
Some are PhDs. Some people work, you know, with the animals. Some are just stories of collecting.
Yeah.
It's a loose interpretation of field notes, but it's kind of like the old write and write books. And I think that'll be interesting to people. Just a little story on the species or subspecies.
Yeah, that's actually how we got in touch. Was I was talking to you about vertebralis pictures.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, you know, when I'm sitting here, so the vertebralis, so those pictures, Right and Right has they have 4 pictures: picture of the top of the head, side of the face, the mid-body dorsum, and the ventrals. And I really like that. If you ever get a copy and look at those,
that's
why I repeated that in all the Pituophis. Nice. But of course, I couldn't get all of those. There were a few, obviously. And I even have Coronalis in there, which is, you know, the extinct form from Coronado Island. Just because if I don't put it in there, and I say that it's considered extinct and only 9 were ever collected and all this stuff. If I don't put it in there, somebody just reading about Pituophis never knows or hears about this. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important for your education to know all of that.
Absolutely.
So it'll be controversial and naysayers, but I learned.
Good. That makes it better.
I learned with the first 2 books, though, that always be nice. Everybody has a right for their opinion when you write a book, and you just have to buck up. And most time, you know, I'll say, well, I hope the next person does a better job, and maybe you'll like it better. But if they're really obnoxious, it's a great thing to remember if you write something. I just say, excuse me, the title of your book is what? Because if you haven't written a book, trust me, it's not that you can. If you have a publisher, it's very difficult. Anybody can write a book and get it self-published, and a lot of people do today and stuff. But for a publisher to put out, for like the Pituophis book, you put $40,000-$50,000 out. It's a lot of money, and there's no guarantee with snake books you get your money back. You hope it's good. So it's not an easy process today, and it's a dying thing.
It's hard. It's hard
for sure. But anyway, we'll see where it falls. I hope it contributes in some positive way.
Well, I got a question from John Lasseter, who's in the chat watching this live, and he says, and I agree with them. We have these definitions. This is a preamble to his question that we call things pines, we call things gophers, we call things bulls.
Yeah.
And he says, Jani, Depii, and then he references the Lineaticollis gibsoni. Are they pines, gophers, bulls? And then my kind of follow up on that is, are they just Pituophis?
So this will be controversial in the book. So the common nomenclature, I have found it very difficult for Depii to have the nominate form be called a bull snake.
Yeah.
Okay. And the subspecies be called a pine snake, as in Jani. So I reverted back to the original. Of course, I have the common name that everybody's frequent with underneath in parentheses, but I have John's bull snake is Jani, as it was originally described.
So
you have the Mexican bull snake and you have John's bull snake.
Okay.
So I can't see calling both those pines as disjunct from the eastern, pine clad. I don't like that word pine. It's associated with high pine forest and
long leaf pine,
occidental sort of thing. So, but underneath it's very clearly, what we all recognize it as. But I find it very disconcerting to have the nominate form, a bull snake and the subspecies a pine snake in the common vernacular. It just doesn't make much sense to me. So when you write a book, you can take some of those liberties and do that. People have associated Depii with Lineaticollis, and I don't see it. Everything I've read, I don't like that association. Lineaticollis is fine where it is right now. Lineaticollis, and then Gibsoni. I have Gibsoni now. I hate them. I can't. I can't. They kick my ass. I love Lineaticollis.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, they're different snakes. These things to me, they're kind of like a fox snake. Fox snakes to me always look like somewhere between a rat snake and a bull snake. Mm-hmm. Just subjective looking at these snakes.
Yeah, sure.
And when I look at Lineaticollis, I say, golly, these are somewhere between rat snakes and gopher snakes. These things, they're long, angular. My Gibsoni are, and you keep them long enough, and then they get big and heavy.
They're big,
4.5 feet, and they I don't know if they've bred this year or not. I've had them together, but when they start cruising, and of course there's subterranean burrowers and stuff, and their habitats, a lot of it's gone. They're along many of the ag fields where all the gophers are and stuff. But I find them very difficult to work with because they feed when they want to feed, and then they go off feed until they're almost skinny, and then they feed. And I never had that problem. I bred Lineaticollis early from Tom Moisey, who I dedicated the book to, and huge clutches of eggs, 30 eggs. And they all came out feeding and doing really well. The Gibsoni can be problematic. They're different and rare.
Yeah,
they're actually not quite as attractive because they miss the vertebral, lines and things replaced with spots. I hate them, but I'm determined to breed them. Gary's bred them 3 times.
I remember that picture of yours from years and years ago of you holding the Lineaticollis and you're in somebody's snake. I'm not sure who's what, and it's just Lineaticollis monsters.
Well, yeah. That snake was Tom Moisey's, that I held, and that thing was 7 at the time, and it died in San Antonio Zoo over 9 feet.
Jeez.
I've got some pictures of some big Pituophis in this
Yeah.
book, and there's no doubt in my mind that you can have a 10-foot Pituophis somewhere.
I have had every species of Pituophis with the exception of the Lineaticalis and the Gibsoni.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I want to go down that.
I'm beginning to like you a lot, and you guys, and I may just send you a box of these damn things that I hate the hell out of, and say good luck.
My room is perfect for them. I it's about 76 degrees. I keep my hot side about 78, maybe 80. The Jani, the Depii, the Vertebralis, they breed every year. My Bimaris are doing great, and it's just the. Man, those Gibsoni and Lineaticals, I hear horror stories on them.
Well, Gibsoni, Gary just says, they're young, and there's something to that. When I did pythons, I sold my diamonds. I was so frustrated. I sold them at 6 years old.
Yeah.
And little did I know then, there were so few here that many of them don't even start breeding until they're about 7. And sure enough, the pair I sold,
I found that with my Vertebralis. My Vertebralis didn't breed until they were 6 years old.
Yeah.
And they're small. Mine are probably bigger than the average Vertebralis, but that's the only snake in my collection. Out of my whole collection that I still cohab. And I cohab my Vertebralis year round. I brumate them year round. And they only breed because I'm in South Texas where it's hot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's humid. And I have to fight humidity in my snake collection year round. It's a battle.
Well, I'm very humid here in Tallahassee, that's for sure.
But you know what? My Vertebralis, I will see visual locks every time we get a thunderstorm. Every time I get a thunderstorm, I know they're breeding. Yeah, and that just happened last week. I thunderstorm, I got visual locks.
Well, Vertebralis taxonomically is a mess. Grismer, who originally, did a lot of the placement and stuff. So now, at one time there were Vertebralis, Bimaris, Vertebralis. They were all over the place. So Grismer now has Bimaris gone and Vertebralis going all the way up to almost where Anectons is found, way up in northern Baja, in the Alamo region of Baja, which I don't agree with. And I'm nobody, so it doesn't really matter. But but Robles and their paper, a significant paper, kind of disagrees too. So when taxonomists or academics can't agree, the PhDs are not agreeing, I feel very comfortable in writing the book and saying, well, for what it's worth, I don't agree either. Vertebralis, it's very complicated because Vertebralis was thought to be the lagunas down in the Cape.
The southernmost version of the
it was a separation. But if you go to the coastline on both sides, near La Paz and that, there is some intergradation there. But I like Bimaris as Bimaris. I like Vertebralis as subspecies. I think Vertebralis is a very different snake, and of course, it's given its own species. But I like all the catenifer chain uninterrupted the way it was because I think it makes sense, including the insular forms. But we'll see. I think if people read the preface and my notes at the beginning of the book, they'll certainly understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
In talking about these different species and stuff. But
I'm definitely looking forward to reading it.
You guys Flavarufa fans?
Of course.
The corn snake.
the Lafayette Flavaruvus, yeah.
So different, yeah. Great snakes, and so are Situla.
The species it's remiss.
Not anything like, but just color wise.
What are the cave bat eaters that are in the same group as the Flavaruvus? They're a little bit the Yucatan rat snakes. I can't remember the scientific name.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I think those are cool as hell, and I wish they were.
They are. They're great snakes. Yeah, they're great snakes.
They remind me of a Mollendorfi from the other side of the planet.
Yeah. Mollendorfi are cool too.
Yeah.
Tell Hicks, the great painter. You guys know tell.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it had a terrible accent, paralyzed, from the neck down. And he paints with, basically with his teeth, and a very good friend, but he breeds probably the best Situla in the world still. Yeah. So really interesting. Some from Greece and some from other places.
Mhm.
So, but
Those are
I
cool.
tell people, when you can't get those, you can get the real thing. You can get a corn snake. It's got all the color and more character, So,
I pulled it up for us. It's a pseudo alafe fascescens. Fascessions. I can't.
well,
pronounce
that's in flux too. All
Yeah.
that stuff. So,
Oh, they're always
yeah. I mean, the new king snake thing is that they're all the way from California to the east. They're just the kings, just schedule it. I don't,
We're not.
I don't like that either. And,
Greg, I'll have you back on for an episode of King Snake Chronicles, and we can do all the King Snake taxonomy arguments, because I'm with you on that. We need to split it all
yeah,
up.
I mean, it's crazy now. All the Central American milk snakes and things have changed and stuff. And I'm kind of old school, and there is some truth that you get stuck in your ways and you don't like change as you get older. And some change is good and makes perfect sense, but some of it just does not. And it's okay, if you're into snakes, to say, hey, I don't like that, and here's why.
I think
So
the
your
taxonomists are bored and they
opinion
want to make
counts.
the nerds upset.
What's that, Justin?
So the taxonomists get bored and they want to make the nerds upset.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's some crazy stuff out there, but anyway.
Well, Craig, there's a couple questions we ask everybody before we cut out on the show.
Okay.
I would love to, before I even preface these questions, say if there's a chance, maybe in a couple months, maybe in 6 months, maybe after the book is released, you'd like to come back on the show and have a conversation with some of us about Pituophis, maybe even get a little bit more into king snakes, maybe even have a couple more corn snake questions.
Sure.
So if that's something you're up to, but
Sure,
usually
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, be happy to do that, because here's the deal. If you write a book at my age, at 76, and it really sucks, you only have to put up with all the comments for a couple of years, because then you're dead.
Come on.
Write a book when you're 25. When you're 50, somebody's going to say, "Oh, you wrote that sucky book, man." So, I'll weather the storm and see what the naysayers say, and I'd be happy to come back and support my view and
Awesome.
do that. And I like your format. I like the fact that the three of you are on here, and I do remember you guys. So
It's good. Yeah. Well, we remember you. Some of the. I actually have a snake from you that Mike Kosicki has. Justin had a picture of it. It was one of the Phoenix Zeppelin line. It was a sun-kissed Okati. And I got that from you. One of the most memorable things that, and I'll say it. Greg, you don't know this.
Well, next time, just ask and I'll give you the snakes. I know you guys.
No. Me and Justin walked up to the table, and you were visiting with a friend, and you had made a bookcase for your books, which we've all read, and it had a lizard on it, and I'm remiss to tell you what kind of lizard it was, and it was a personal friend of yours, and me and Justin had sat back and watched you guys have this conversation, and I remember maybe about 10 minutes of this
Doesn't
conversation.
sound as creepy as you think it is.
No, it's not. It's not creepy.
It wasn't. We weren't.
Actually, that was Russ Gurley who wrote the book before Bert, the lizard guy, before he died.
Okay.
We got to see the book right before he died.
Oh wow!
And I made that. That's a Tegu.
That's right.
Baby. And I made a juvenile, and I made that sleeve for Russ.
Yeah.
Because Russ published that himself on his nickel. Of course, he didn't make his money back, and Russ has done a lot of that, as Bob has, for the right reasons. So, yeah, that was quite a conversation. Russ is a wonderful person.
And so
good guy.
That we weren't listening to y'all's conversation. We were just happened to be at the table at the same time.
Nobody listens to my conversation. I talk so damn much. Nobody listens to me anyway. You know.
Well, I just remember there was like a little bit of an interruption, and you kind of were like, "Hey, can I help you guys?" And I honestly, I think maybe I said it or maybe Justin said it, and I was like, "No, we're exactly where we need to be. This is y'all keep doing what y'all are doing. We'll be leaves on the wall." And no, love seeing it. Love seeing the passion that's still there. Love being a part of it. Everybody has this illusions of grandeur that we get to carry a torch, and I don't think we do. I don't think that's how it works. I think we all have to light our own torch and see where that goes.
Yeah, the grand, all that kind of stuff is.
Yeah.
That takes too much out of it.
Yeah,
it's exhausting. Leave that stuff behind. Mm-hmm. Leave. Do if you feel like you're doing the right thing, follow what you feel and do that and just do it well. And don't worry about the rest of it. I mean, there's so many opinions and so much. This industry is really, it needs to take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And be a little kinder to one another.
Calm down.
Like the locality guys and the morph guys. And come on, guys. Come on. This is a lot of fun and it's very interesting. And let's focus on all that. All the rest of the stuff. Let's just stop this.
It's not that serious.
Yeah. And it's the only time I get to see the Lassiters are in Daytona. They stop by and I see him once at a time. So he's a big Mex guy, and so am I. And he breeds the best stuff. And someday I might be able to breed something as nice as he breeds.
I'm lucky. I get to have beers with him on the weekends.
Yeah. So good guy.
He's been a mentor of mine for a lot of years, and more importantly, he's been a friend.
Good mentor to have for sure.
He just gave me a dog. That's how close of friends me and John are.
Yeah.
But yeah. So the last question, unless Justin or Joe, is there anything else you guys wanted to ask?
I do have one that I wrote down and circled.
Okay.
Craig, what is the weirdest shit you've ever found in the field? Be it an animal, a random abandoned car upside down. Just you've been in the field a lot.
Well, I found a dead 13-year-old girl snake hunting.
Holy
damn.
shit.
So we're not 13, 15. So in it was in the 70s. I lived in Plantation, Florida, and I had this one field where I was finding Eastern diamondbacks and Everglades rat snakes were like in this one area. And I was out there walking around and I saw this blonde, what I thought was fur. And, I looked down and I kind of pushed everything away, and it was a skull with blonde hair, and it was a girl. And there was a big big caterpillar bulldozer clearing a lot. And I went over to him and asked, if he had some way of contacting somebody that I thought I just found a body. And so I stayed there, and finally the police came out, and it was a girl was kidnapped, and she was a Northeast high school student. The interesting thing about this story is I stood out there and reported it, and for about an hour I became a suspect.
Wow.
I report this. I mean, the body's 6 months old, I guess,
Yeah.
And finally it occurred to me. I said, I looked at it, I said, do I need a lawyer? I mean, I'm out here. He goes, well, what are you doing out here? And I said, I'm snake hunting. He goes, who looks for snakes? It's kind of one of that.
Yeah.
I said, well, I do. I said, you walk over here and I'll show you my snake collection. I mean, sort of thing. But that was pretty strange.
Yeah.
I mean, let's see. Gosh, snake wise. I mean, I've found a couple of patternless things, a couple, God, I'll think of something as soon as we get off, I'm sure. That's a very good question. Golly. I found a redfoot tortoise. out in the wilds near the Everglades. I stopped around in the 70s. I went, what the hell are you doing here?
Box
This
turtle.
was in the 70s. Yeah. Yeah. I found that. No, I can't think of anything really specific like that.
Well, I mean, you answered on both ends of the spectrum. We got like, oh, cute, a tortoise, and then a fucking horror movie. So we've got.
Well, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's scary.
You stay kind of long enough, and you turn stuff over, you find all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh,
the best I got was a weasel.
what was that?
The best I ever found was a weasel.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Sat there and watched
Cool.
them.
Well, now I've surprised some pretty decent animals. I'll tell you that. One of the toughest animals in West Texas is a badger.
Mm-hmm.
Just shy of a wolverine. And, I was out on 385, about 4 miles from the house, and there's a prairie dog town out there.
Yeah.
And I saw this dirt come flying out of this hole, and I thought, well, a coyote's down there or something. And this badger comes backing out with a full-grown prairie dog, by the neck, and I did flip a log over and found a badger that didn't like me. That scared the hell out of me. A lot of skunks, a couple porcupines.
I got lined up by a mountain lion on 3 Mile West. John Lasseter was there with me, and we were walking different cuts, and I'm walking 3 Mile West, and I'm shining up. I'm like, man, that looks like a set of eyes. That looks like a set of eyes looking at me. And John pulls up in his car. He's going back to, 3 Mile or 9 Mile West, and he stops and he says, Chris, what are you doing? I'm just sitting there in the middle of the road. He's like, you find something? And I was like, I think something found me. And he goes, rah! Makes a big scary mountain lion noise and drives off. And I go running back to my truck like a child.
Yeah. Well, I've done that.
You're in the wild.
And, my 10 years out there, I think Lynn and I saw 9. The coolest one was on 2810, out looking for Hognose snakes. And it went right off the road. It was about 30 feet, and then it just kind of disappeared. And I walked over there and I went, shit, that's a hell of a drop. That thing just jumped off of there, and it was, sheer cliff like. And then I'm looking over and I realized right under the shelf, right under my head in the shelf, the mountain lion was right underneath me. It's gone right down. There's a little shelf, and it was just sitting there because I could just see the edge of the side of his body sitting there, backed up. And, I was probably safe, but still a little disconcerting.
Yes. Mountain lions are like real scary.
Different when you don't have glass between you.
Yeah.
Well, every year they pick off some old person up there in the park. It never fails. Yeah. So it's always somebody my age. So, of course, that's a good way to die. I mean, how did Trumbower die? Mountain lion got him. That's cool. If you die of cancer or heart attack, to go, well, but you say you were killed by a mountain lion, they go, no shit, man. That's really cool.
Come on now.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So last questions. So we usually ask 2 questions at the end of CornStars as we're talking about corn snakes. The first question is about palmetto corns, but you've already answered that. We talked about palmetto corns. Mm-hmm. What is your ideology and thoughts on scaleless corn snakes?
Well, I wasn't really too enthused about it. I don't know, but, after the first couple of years, you start looking at the skin colors. I mean, just from a visual, you go, God, these are pretty cool looking sort of things. But, what you're breeding a defect. But then again, we breed technically chromatophore defects. We breed defects in things. Leucism is a defect, and we breed those things and stuff. I don't have anything against people doing them. I don't particularly, Bern Bechtel was, the first ones I ever saw were from the wild that Bern had. He had a mole king snake, I think, and and something else that was scaleless, and I thought they were cool as hell. So I mean, I don't know. I don't have them. I won't probably have them, but I'm kind of neutral on it, I guess. Why? What do you guys think?
I don't know. Our one of our sponsors that we're going to talk about before we close out the show, Silent Hill Reptiles, produced some anery scaleless corn snakes, and was showing pictures of some of the animals they produce, and they are probably some of the coolest, some of the damn coolest corn snakes I've ever seen.
Well, no, there's no doubt. Yeah. I mean, the color somehow
it's crazy.
Yeah, somehow the skin. Who would know that too, right?
Yeah.
And the skin color, and I admit I've stopped and looked and go, wow, these are pretty wild. I don't have anything against them, or the reason I haven't had them, I just haven't had them. So
I don't get the appeal. The aneries look nice, but other than that, I'm like, I don't get it.
Yeah, it's a little saggy for me. It's
the feeling. The first time I held a scaleless corn snake,
so this is
I was. I don't know about that, but yeah, it was a little familiar.
Well, we know where all that's going, so yeah.
It's a very phallic feeling. It's
very.
Anyways,
So,
anyways, so Greg, we're gonna close this episode out. I have to tell you, thank you so much for making the time for us. We're so excited. We've done hundreds of episodes with the Herpetoculture Network. CornStars is one of the longer running shows, and we're just very excited that you are willing to come on, and we're proud to be where we're at now. So thank you. Go ahead.
Well, happy to do it. Always mystified why somebody wants to, listen to a storyteller, and I'm full of stories and stuff. But I appreciate you having me on. I think you guys are great. I like your format. I like your questions. It's I think you got a good thing going here.
Thank you. If somebody wanted to reach out and maybe ask you some questions or see what maybe you're going to have available over the next this coming season, how would they do that?
Sure. They can messenger or email Craig Trumbower at gmail.com. I don't I don't ship, I don't keep lists, I don't take deposits. I like many people on Facebook, I'll say, well, I'm producing some of these or something like this. It all that works for me. But if somebody's interested, what I do is I'll tell them, well, when eggs have hatched, if you'll call me back in July, then we'll talk about something, and that gives people, this industry, people change their minds so quickly, and after 2 months, a lot of people decide they don't want something or they want to change their mind. So, but if you call me out, I'll tell you what I'm breeding and what I'll have and how you can get those. I go to Daytona and I deliver everything there, and there's shippers there, and people can arrange for shipping there, or they can have somebody pick them up, and it works for me, so it's easy for me. And I ship, for so many years that I just don't want to do it anymore. So
sure.
Yeah, I mean. So we'll keep rocking on, and I'm going to have a Planet Snake Tune T-shirt made. I just realized that somebody's already making doormats with Snake Tune. I don't know what to think about that, but I'll send you guys a T-shirt. You can send me your sizes. I'm going to have made up here in the next month, and Jordan Parrott's doing the graphics on them. So
cool. Awesome. I may bug you this year about some Agalma. That's
Well, yeah. Let me know early. I'm just keeping one pair now. I had 3 pair. I've got a really outstanding pair. She's gravid now, and they're most of them come out feeding really well. They're a really strong snake. I think they're really special. So
yeah, they are.
Yeah,
they definitely are.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, Craig. Again, thank you so much.
Yeah, really, absolutely honored.
Yes.
Well, yeah. thank you guys. Keep doing what you're doing, and I love your generation, what you're doing, and just remember, you're not spring chickens anymore, and you got a responsibility to mentor, and please do that. Take the time to bring somebody along. Keep an eye open for that kid that can't afford something, and
Sure.
all those things come back to make you a better person.
I look forward to in 2026 you meeting my daughter. That'll be
I would love that.
That'll be a special thing. Yeah, it'd be awesome.
I would love that. I'm really fond of my grandkids, and the older you get, it's kind of funny. You gravitate towards those young kids, and you see all that fresh youth and excitement and all those things, and you identify with that. You remember that, and so it's a good thing. And certainly in a world that we have today, we need some good mentoring. So,
absolutely.
Yep.
Agreed.
Well, if anybody wants to get a hold of Justin, you can do that through a couple different ways. You can
very hard man to get a hold of.
Palmetto Coast Exotics, or you can reach out to the Herpetoculture Network, or you can message him directly through Fulvius Apparel. Joe, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
The only thing I'm going to respond to is on Instagram at Open Hostility, all one word. Honestly, my Facebook only exists because my grandma doesn't remember that she can text me directly. So that's about it for that. But yeah, hit me up on Instagram. That's fine.
Cool. All right. And you guys know how to get a hold of me. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or just call me. I usually put my phone number in most of the things. If you find any of those, or email, same thing, Badlands Herpetoculture at yahoo.com. And I'm happy to talk, chat, help, whatever I can. Thank you to our sponsors once again, BlackBox Cages, again making a high-level superior product to most of the racks and cages available in the market. Also, super quick turnaround, super quick shipping. Always keep that in mind, so you're not sitting there for 9 months like Justin was that one time trying to get like a rack or something. Yeah,
that ended up being terrible.
Yeah, it's a bad rack. Silent Hills Reptiles, JT and Mindy doing their thing, keeping everything, making some of the best corn snake morph combos with traceable lineage, which is one of my favorite things about what they're doing. Whether it's a morph or locality, they know where it came from. They're happy to tell you. They're happy to give you pictures of the adults. And FulviusApparel.com. Hit up Justin. Some of the best T-shirts. I wear them literally all the time.
Me too.
That's all my shirts are Fulvius Apparel. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Again, Greg, awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much. And you guys stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll be back for Snakes and Stogies on Monday.
All right, guys.